We have often come across non-feminists, feminists, and even anti-feminists that have pointed out that the one true place that feminism is really needed is the third world. We promise. Places like Saudi Arabia, India, and other such countries where women are supposedly truly treated as second-class citizens under an actual patriarchy, and rape culture is real for reals. But can a case be made that feminism is not needed even in these places? Well, we're going to discuss that now. Welcome to Honey Badger Radio number 55. Does the third world need feminism? I'm your host, Brian Martinez, and I'm joined by Alison, Hannah, and Karen. They're basically the trifecta of Badgers. And we have two special guests so far. Welcome Habib, and we lost somebody.
Yeah,
Maria, she'll be back.
Maria dropped out. I think she'll be back.
So it's just me, I guess.
Oh my God, you have to do all of the work of those three people that were going to come in.
All the heavy lifting. That's all.
I do remember. Okay, I'm going to take this on a slight little tangent. Anyone remember a webcomic called Mega Tokyo?
No, well, I remember the title, but I never read it.
Well, there was this episode where a bunch of people were applying for a job, and the job was at Sega. And the guy was like, well, I put all the competitors in my trunk, in my car trunk. And the guy was like, but these are your friends. How could you do it? And he's like, yeah, well, competition is less like that. And he's like, what about everybody who's not your friend? And he just pulls out a gun from his pocket. He's like, gotta get rid of them somehow. So, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. But
I figured there was some kind of, it was like a metaphor or...
Deep allegory?
Yeah, there was like some allegory. Something.
Yeah, I mean, I am the Arab here, so I just went suicide bombing on all my competition. I want all the attention of the Badgers.
I saw.
Well,
we're gonna go. I think
whatever you do, don't blow yourself up, because we're actually not in the building with you, so it won't actually.
No, I devised this ingenious method of just throwing the vest at people.
Oh! Truth bombing is always welcome.
Yeah, actually, Habib might actually argue the counter position that feminism is required in the third world. So just, that I'm not sure if I'm putting words in your mouth or anything, but
yes, you are.
Oh, okay.
I never said that I believed in any ideology, no matter what it is. However, yes, there is a need for women's right advocacy. I never said it was feminism, though.
Yeah, okay. I didn't want to... I was just opening up the possibility of some opposition.
Sure. And that was the one thing I wanted to make clear, too. When I say... when we say, does the third world need feminism, we're not saying, does the third world need women's rights advocacy? And there is a difference between these two things. And mainly it's because, at least from my perspective, feminism is built on a foundation. If you look at women's rights advocacy on its own, outside of an ideology, outside of a structure, it is a simple and very straightforward thing. I see a woman that is disadvantaged in some way that needs to be addressed, and I advocate for that. But feminism doesn't work that way. It's not as simple as that. It's built on a foundation. There are core tenets that must exist in order for you to have a feminist ideology. And those core tenets are actually destructive, not just to men, but also to women. So there is a significant difference. But can we try to observe these things and see if I'm just full of shit or if that's true?
Well, I think the biggest problem with feminism is that it essentially pits the sexes against each other, and it has right since the very beginning in the West, right since the Declaration of Sentiments and prior to that. In terms of it seeing gender relations as, while I guess you would call it traditional patriarchy saw men and women as, team players or, both citizens but different citizens, right? Or they have different rights and responsibilities, they have different responsibilities and entitlements, and those complemented each other, they were complementarian. All of those things, feminism came in and essentially said, we want women to have all of the rights and freedoms that men have, those responsibility and obligation things, later, we'll negotiate those in 100 years or so. And so essentially what you had was this building of a movement that fomented a deep resentment of women for the things that they saw men as having unfairly or unjustly or, sort of unearned privileges, right? And so it really, if you want to undermine the fabric of a society, you attack the bond between men and women, right? You attack the bond between a husband and a wife, the parents of children, right? All of those things. You get in between them, and you kind of sow the seeds of resentment there, right? And I think that this is one of the things that feminism has really been able to do, is sort of make women feel like they're in competition with men. They have to be in competition with men. That they feel like they are that men have an unfair advantage when in terms of this competition, which most men for the last 100 years or so have been like, competition? What? Like, I was just, providing for my family, right? Men don't see themselves in competition with women this way, but feminism has been able to sort of harness this ability of women to see the opposite, that men are in competition with them. And so you sort of have this, it's a destabilizing influence, right? This underlying ideology, right? Men oppress you, men subjugate you, men subordinate you, men unfairly have all of these advantages, men are obsolete, men are harmful, men are all of these awful things, right? And when you actually look at some of the complaints coming out of the developing world, I still remember, like years and years ago, reading an article where there were women in Afghanistan who were protesting at NGOs, focusing almost entirely on helping women and girls. And these women were saying, "What the fuck? You expect us to rebuild Afghanistan without our men, right? Like, our men are going to be dead or sick or crippled or useless. They're going to be, because nobody's helping them, right? And so when you only help us, right, and do not help our husbands and our sons, right, then what you're doing is you're putting the entire onus on rebuilding the society on women, because our men won't be able to help us do it, right?" And that, I think, is one of the biggest reasons why feminism in the third world and the developing world is just the worst fucking idea possible. Anyhow, go ahead. Sorry, I ranted a bit.
No, it's okay. That was weird. Some random person just popped in. I hope somebody didn't just share this link on, like, their Twitter. We may get invaded by dicks.
Oh God.
Well, I'm just saying, like, that was just some random guy just popped in, and I'm like, what was that? Okay,
Yeah,
so...
the last time that happened to you, I kind of know the guys who are behind it.
Oh, okay.
So,
Oh, that's nice.
if you want me to tell it, just let me know after the stream. But okay, I can provide some counterpoint to that, because yes, you said something about the core tenets of feminism. Now, feminism as an ideology have some core tenets, because that's what an ideology is. It has some core tenets to it. However, each ideology is born from a point where it's just an advocacy movement, where it's just an activist kind of movement, but not an ideology. So maybe I would argue that in the third world somewhere, some advocacy for women's rights under the eye of the law is going to develop into its own ideology at one point. I can see it even with the MRAs. We have a talk about it, you and me, Brian, the last time, that eventually you'll see men's rights activism become its own ideology, and that might have some downfalls to it. That's just the way things evolve. But if the tenets of feminism are different in, let's say, the Middle East or the third world, where we actually have women who are not enjoying the same rights under the eye of the law, we have actual discrimination under the eye of the law, and we keep it controlled. Now, the reason why I like to talk about feminism in the West and talk with different activists and different pundits in the West is because I want to when I advocate for women's rights, I don't want to fall into the same mistake. Yes, you did mention that it pits the sexes against one another. That's a big thing that I don't want to fall into. And also the dogmatic nature of feminism in the West is something I never fall into. When I say that, yes, women's rights are a little bit lacking in Saudi Arabia, I'm not saying it's all because of men. I never say that. Because there's a lot of men that are not happy with it. There's a lot of women that are happy with it. It's not about the gender. It's about any equality under the eye of the law. So unless you keep blaming the other gender or the other sex or the other race or whatever, then you should be fine, even as an ideology, if you keep it under control. Now, once it starts going off the deep end, then I'm going to say, yeah, we don't need that shit.
Hannah, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I want to clarify a few things, because when we talk about feminism, we shouldn't conflate feminism with women's rights activism. It's not the same thing, and it never really has been. Feminism originated in the West as a means of gendering human rights issues to reserve compassion and consideration for human rights for women, and to reserve blame for discrimination for men. And then women's rights activism is more geared towards equality in human rights recognition. It's the same thing as men's rights activism. And men's rights activism has never been about gendering human rights to reserve anything specifically for men. It's about degendering human rights discussion and degendering human rights activism to treat human rights in general as a genderless and non-ethnic, non-superficially characterized movement. That if something is a human right, it's everybody's right, not just one specific set of people, and that we should fight for equal treatment under the law and equal treatment, and when it comes to social issues and so on, not for like a specific set of concessions for one group of people, and not to place blame on one group of people. You know, it's like there's that misconception that feminists have put out there that men's rights activists blame women for men's issues, and that's not true. You know, they'll conflate feminism with women, and they'll conflate gynocentrism with women, which is neither is correct. Men's rights activists don't blame women; they blame attitudes, or we blame attitudes, and we blame legal conditions, and we blame groups that oppose efforts at legal reform, which doesn't necessarily mean women.
I wanted to just point something out about the history, the etymology of the word feminism. Feminism, as coined by Charles Fourier, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, he coined it to mean basically judging society by how it treats women, how it benefits women. So the judgment of society isn't based on how it treats all citizens or all people, but just how it treats women. Now, he wasn't particularly like feminist as the equality aspect of it was after him. But that's explicitly what feminism was coined to be. And then later on, it gathered these layers. If the first layer was, of course, political activism within that strain, that idea that society should be judged by how women are treated as a group, as an aggregate, without regard to how men are treated. And then the first iteration past that was taking that and making it a political party, a political position. But from the beginning, from the very first person who coined the term, feminism wasn't about equality. It was about judging society by how it treats women or how women are benefited. And if you look at feminism's actions in that lens, it's never really strayed far from that original coinage. It cares primarily about the treatment of women. It appropriated this concept of equality because I think it could buttress the idea that society wasn't treating women in the way it should. And there's a certain outrage that we have when we think of men taking something from women, men taking equality, men taking privilege, or that men are taking some benefit away from women and depriving women of it. There's a huge outrage over that. We have a huge amount of emotional outrage at the very thought of that. It's offensive to us. So the whole rhetoric around equality and feminism is, I think, less about bringing about equality and more about using the idea that men have somehow deprived women of equality in order to perpetuate this notion of victimhood and to try to compel society to, or us to see society in terms of how it benefits women. It's not about equality. It's about this perception, or maintaining this perception of women's victimhood. And I mean, if you look at feminism's acts throughout history, they have not really agitated for equality. The first big thing that feminists did, and they didn't actually do it, it was actually, I believe, the Labour Party, according, I think Karen and Hannah would point me to this, who actually got votes for women. But the reason why that's not an equality is because it created two classes of citizens right off the bat. It was inequality right off the bat. One class of citizen could vote, but without the responsibilities to the state. The other class had responsibilities and the vote. And no, the vote isn't necessarily tied to citizenship responsibilities, but citizenship is tied to citizenship responsibilities. So women gain citizenship without the corresponding responsibilities that men had. That is creating two classes of citizen, not equality. And if you look at the original term, the original way that feminism was coined, what it meant, how society treats women is how society should be judged, whether or not it's moral, then all of feminism's actions make complete sense. They start from that original core concept. Incidentally, an original core concept developed by a man. The idea that women are the moral measuring stick of a society, and by extension of men's actions. And that's not really surprising. That's a very, very traditional notion of women's role and men's role. So it all comes out of a very traditional notion of women and men's role. Never challenges that original lens, the idea that men are supposed to protect and provide for women. And then equality becomes just another thing that men failed to protect. Inequality is something that men failed to protect women from, and inequality is something, or equality is something that men failed to provide women. And then also you get that hint that men are doing it on purpose, which is offensive to everyone. Everyone around the world despises a man who steals from women who need something. They despise men like that. I don't think there's a culture on this world that wouldn't want to stop that kind of a guy. I mean, just imagine it. Some guy stealing from a hungry woman, stealing food from a hungry woman. I don't think there's a culture on earth that wouldn't want to stomp him to a muddy, bloody mud hole.
Yeah. No, I agree. And like, if you look at the actual timeline of all of feminism's victories, what you see is women gaining the rights and the freedoms, and then sometimes 50 years later, sometimes 100 years later, them sort of kind of acquiring some semblance of equality in the responsibilities and obligations that went along with that, right? So, I mean, even if you want to go all the way back to the Tender Years Doctrine, which was 1865 or something like that, right? Where essentially prior to that, and there were plenty of exceptions, believe me, there were enough exceptions within the law to the assumption of paternal custody. There were enough exceptions under the law that you could bring into a courtroom that, roughly half of women walked away from a divorce with custody of their children in a lot of places, right? So, I mean, it still, even then, was not just a 100% blanket, the dad gets the kids. But the reason why there was a presumption within the law that the dad gets the kids was because the dad got the entire freaking bill. He got the entire responsibility inside the marriage and after the marriage was dissolved to financially support the household of his minor children. That was his job. That was his obligation under the law, right? And when the Tender Years Doctrine came into being, which essentially it was essentially brought about because paternal custody didn't serve women's happiness. right? It made women sad, right? And so therefore we should switch it around and give women custody of the kids by default after divorce, at least of young children, children who are too young to have jobs, essentially, is what it boiled down to, or to go to boarding school. And so what you essentially had was this switch of custody rights from the father to the mother, right? But the parental responsibility, the financial responsibility, remained entirely on the man. And even now, and this is what we're talking 150 years later, right? 150 years later, we still do not have an equal assignment of financial responsibility towards women. They still get custody of the children in 85% of cases. It's still extremely difficult and costly for a man to actually get even 50-50 custody, right? And at the same time, we still have these double standards in terms of financial responsibility that, that exist in terms of mothers and fathers being responsible for the financial well-being of their children. Women after divorce are less likely to be ordered to pay child support. Their child support orders are typically lower, even when considering their level of income. They are more likely to default, either partially or completely, like to be in arrears or refuse to pay altogether, than men are, and they are less likely to be jailed for that, right? And this is like, you're seeing, maybe 1% of the 50 to 60,000 people in prison every single fucking day in America for failure to pay child support, right? Maybe 1% of those are women, and these are the most egregious cases of women who have decided that, I have tons of money and I'm just not going to fucking pay that asshole, right? This is what you have to do as a woman to be held to the same level of responsibility to your children that men still are 150 years after the Tender Years Doctrine came into being, and 60 years after equal rights legislation came into being, where it was mandated by the federal government, by the Constitution of the United States, by Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms, that men and women be treated equally under the law, right? And you still do not see even remotely equal treatment, even in the case of holding the non-custodial parent as liable if that as a man, if that non-custodial parent is a woman, let alone 50-50 shared custody, or an equal shot at sole custody, an equal, shot in court if you choose to, to go against a spouse an ex-partner that you feel is unfit, right? Like, literally, what we have had is this machine that sees equality only in terms of rights and only in terms of freedoms, right? And just refuses to accept the idea that those rights and those freedoms come with responsibilities and obligations and a duty towards self-sufficiency and self-determination and personal agency and taking accountability for your actions, right? Or lack thereof, right? We don't see any of that, right? We still don't see it. 150 fucking years after the Tender Years Doctrine, we still are not seeing women held as accountable as men when they say, fuck that, I'm not paying for these kids, right? That I chose to have and that I walked away from, right? So, like, literally, it's absolutely, like, even if you just go in terms of women's rights activism, that is not the entire picture. That is not how is it helping a Bangladeshi family, right? Okay, dad just died in the shipbreaking yard last week. Industrial accident, because that fucking shipbreaking yard kills hundreds of men a year, right? That particular one. Okay, so the 15-year-old son, right? Now he has his two sisters and his mother to support. And by law, right? He's got all the rights, but he's also got the entire obligation for the family, right? And so he goes and he takes a job in that shipbreaking yard. It's against the law for him to work because child labor is illegal in Bangladesh, but he's willing to lie about his age and go and take that job that killed his father, and he's going to work in bare feet with no safety equipment or hard hat, lugging freaking, cutting apart ships, right, for scrap. That's what he's going to do to support his mother and sisters. Now, we're going to give the mother and the sisters the exact same right to work in that fucking shipbreaking yard. Problem solved! Not.
So yes, we are looking at a. Oh, Karen, you're echoing.
Echo.
We are looking at a difference between, as Karen mentioned, rights. But the thing is that feminists, they may want things for women, but they don't want to deal with any of the obligations or responsibilities that come with those things. So that is one of the ways in which the foundation, it's foundationally different.
It's not just feminists. It's not just not just feminists.
It's not just feminists, but in this particular what we're talking about here. But I wanted to give. I know that Maria Al Masani just joined us, and I know that she has some things to say about this too. So I wanted to first off introduce Maria. Welcome to the call.
Hi.
And I wanted to let you give us your thoughts on does the third world need feminism? Now, you're from Yemen originally, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, so you might be able to speak to this to some degree. You go ahead and take the floor if you wish.
So, first of all, thank you so much, all of you, for what you have been saying. I feel really vindicated in what I've been talking about. And I'm a women's rights activist. I am not a feminist. I want to distinguish that I care about the empowerment of women, the families, the society, the community. And in the West, I mainly care about empowerment of men because they're the ones who are having trouble. Sometimes I do also advocate for women. For example, abuse shelters. In Ottawa, they're overcapacity, and I think it's good to donate so that when victims of abuse can go to a shelter. And I'm really wondering, are there like shelters for men? And because there's also women's shelters, I wonder, is there like a men's shelter and so on. So the other issue, the big issue with women's rights in the Middle East, we hate feminists because feminists, it reminds me of sex worker rights struggles. Feminists want to save sex workers from themselves, and sex workers are like, can you pay my bills? And what I see from feminists is just male hate, male hate, male hate, and racism, huge racism. What you said about the tender ages doctrine. Well, when I grew up, I heard, oh, you are backward because of your race and your religion. And that's what I heard, and the West is amazing. Then I went to the West, which I thought, oh, everyone has rights, it's perfect paradise, and I see men treated like crap. Forgive my language, I see that the divorce cases are unfair. My stepfather, he had a divorce, and he had to spend a lot of money to just get joint custody, which I thought, just a basic right. Also, I see women are really taking advantage of men and mooching on them. Meaning, I think if there is a housewife who's sitting at home, sacrifice her career for the kids, and there is like no way she can, being so long out of the profession, earn the same living she used to, or maybe she doesn't have a degree and sacrificed it for children, yes, I think she can get half of the house, half of the man's earnings and the alimony. But if a woman is working, why does she get half the house? Like a lot of this man hate, it just like eats away at the soul. Communism has this victim culture. And so you create learned helplessness, and you can't do anything for yourself. I used to be a leftist, and then I became suicidal. Because it was always, I'm a victim, hate others, then I saw a psychologist. And that's when I realized, oh, what's making me sick is this victim mentality. So
Um,
and I learned it from university here in the West. So I went and I took, I had some social justice warrior professors, and no, it's really, really unhealthy. And what's healthy for women and for men is gender harmony. You know, we're not enemies. We have enough fitna, we call it in the Middle East, sectarianism. You know, Sunni Shia sectarian, how they fight? That Iran came, it brought it from communism. Well, I see the Sunni Shia fight over men and women in the West, and I think, you know, enough sectarianism. We have to find a way to have harmony, equality. You know, we aren't men and women aren't classes. We are people. We should love each other and have happy families, a happy community. You know, we should stop fighting and hating.
can I ask you a question? Oh, I'm getting some feedback from your end too. Sorry, Maria.
Actually, if you want to sort that out for yourself, mute, Brian.
That's not me.
No,
Are you sure?
That's Maria.
Oh, okay, just a second. Sorry, Mary, I'm going to have to mute you.
I'm muting you for a second, Maria. But I just wanted to ask you. Okay, so you're from Yemen, and I wanted to get an idea because okay, so here's the thing. So the foundation of feminist dogma is built on a few central tenets. One of them, which is the most important, at least from their perspective, is the idea of the patriarchy. Now, in the West, you know, many of them believe that we still live in a patriarchal culture. But even the people who are anti-feminists, which is sort of how I started this off, even many folks who are anti-feminists, critical of feminism, non-feminists, and those that are, you know, consider themselves to be rationalists, will make the argument that the Middle East, places like Yemen, places like Saudi Arabia, places like India, and like Africa and stuff, are real examples of a patriarchy, like real patriarchies, okay? And that they're atheists will make this argument as well. They're built on these sort of Abrahamic, you know, religions which are patriarchal in their very nature. So what I want to ask you is that an accurate representation? Does a patriarchy really exist in the Middle East? Is that one of those central tenets, or is that just people not really looking into it enough, not getting a full understanding, and basically comparing the third world to the Western world because, you know, they're, again, like many of them are just non-feminists, anti-feminists, or they are atheist types that just have it out for religion, you know, much of the time. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yes, to be accurate, like in Yemen, I am from Taiz. The village near me is actually, technically speaking, a matriarchy. So, and in Socotra, they have matriarchy. Some of the Middle Eastern countries, so my area, Taiz, is kind of mixed. We have matriarchy, we have patriarchy, we have both, but we don't have anything like the crazy social justice warrior feminist stuff we have in the West, you know? It's very different.
Okay, and it's also important to differentiate the definition of patriarchy. Like there's, you know, patriarchy that just says, you know, father of the family, or, you know, the household is, the father's responsible for the household. And then there's the feminist definition of patriarchy is far more like, you know, women everywhere oppressed by men everywhere at the benefit of men at the suffering of women kind of thing. So that's another important difference. So do you see what I'm saying, Maria? I just want to get an idea, and I'm also asking this of Habib as well. So if you guys want to think about that question that I'm posing.
Well, I've been writing notes for the past 20 minutes, and I do have a little bit to say. Yeah. I
Go ahead.
I think any country that would have Sharia law, like no secular ruling, just Sharia law ruling, would have to be, by definition, a patriarchy. If you're in the Quran, like chapter 4, verse 34, the first three words, which means men are in charge of women. Just right there. And the entire verse, like, by the way, the surah is called the Nisa, which means women, and the rights of women are all listed in there. And if you read it, it's pretty obvious that women are considered a second-class citizen because they're just the keepers of the household or the home, while men are really in charge of anything. I'm not saying that it's just unfair for women. It's unfair for men as well. like the example that you gave in Bangladesh. That happens a lot. Like the son would have to just get up and work because
Well,
women are not allowed to work.
I
And
think
not only that,
I did
even if
want
they
to
work, they're not in charge of the home.
well,
Or
I did want to add. I did want to add that in patriarchal societies, like there is this desire to essentially say second class and first class citizen. But if I think that's an unhelpful way to frame things in terms of traditional roles. I think that different citizens, because women may have had fewer rights, but they had fewer obligations in terms of being responsible for other people. And
no. When
more
it comes to Sharia law,
I
by the way,
would agree. For Yemen, that is absolutely true. Because in Taiz, women have different rights than in Sana'a, the city. And I think the same is in Saudi Arabia. I think it's more, what I see in Saudi
I would
is,
argue against
let me
that.
finish. You
I would
know,
argue against
first
that.
of all, in the village in Yemen, women farm. And if women want rights, they go and they shoot Houthis, okay? If women wants a right, she picks up a gun. But the thing is, with the obligations, it's grueling work on the farm, day in, day out. Many women say, you know what, I'd rather marry a man, give up my rights, and have him do the work. So that's the city versus village conflict. Is if you're a housewife, you give up your rights, and you don't have to have backbreaking work. But if you do the backbreaking work on the farm, you have the rights. But, you know, you have the backbreaking responsibilities. And then some city women just want it all, and then they sit there and cry, you know, I want to be like in the West, you know, and they try to influence their men to be atheists. At the same time, for example, what I see is in societies where you don't have atheism, you have community. They don't devolve into SJWs like they do here after a few generations. You have community because there is war, there is hardship, and you have community coming together in good times, in bad, surviving, thriving. In war, you know, having this spirituality, it helps. People survive. And yes, city women do not have rights because they do not have responsibilities. You can argue that's unfair, but in the villages, women have rights, and they have horrible, horrendous, very hard responsibilities, really backbreaking work. And also they have to fight. Like my great-grandmother, she kicked the Ottomans out. My grandmother fought. I mean, and my grandmother, she was a farmer. So, really tough women of the mountains. I had to defend my home, and I had to fight at one point. So it's like, yeah, it's nice to be married to a man and not have the back-breaking responsibilities of a village farm woman. Okay, you sacrifice some freedoms, but you sacrifice a lot of freedoms, but then you don't have to work. But your husband breaks his back, and the men, they have painting jobs, hazardous factory jobs. So yes, you know, a person gets their freedom if they work. Now the thing is, with the 21st century, there is a new type of a job, and that's like the technical work, secretary work, etc. So for the first time, work is not backbreaking. So a city woman can technically have a job and be a lady and not be like a farm woman and a warrior. She has to, like, a city woman can actually have a desk job. You know, she doesn't have to kill herself working. So that's like, this is the first time in history, and so that's when you have a lot of new questions about, wow, now city women, we're giving them rights because all of a sudden they start working. But should we give the housewife the same rights? Because with the revolution, we have a problem in Yemen with the revolution. You know, you have all this propaganda war going on, and many housewives are like, oh, yes, we should surrender. And I'm like, no, you should respect the men who fight and the women who fight. You should respect people who fight. And we give a voice to people who don't have any responsibilities, and they make horrible decisions because they don't even know what's going on. And they say, oh, stop the war. I'm like, okay, one, we didn't choose the war. The former dictator wanted to get back in power. He chose the war. He's fighting. Your men are fighting him. How about support your men who fight and a couple women who fight? You know, just support the troops. if you're sitting there handing out flowers, crying, "So stop the war," that's not going to do anything. And a lot of people listen to these women because of gender equality, and I'm like, look, I am sorry, but go back to the kitchen. I feel bad. I tell women to go back to the kitchen, but I do that. And once I told a guy to go back to the kitchen because he was just doing nothing with the war effort, and he was just saying, "Oh, we need to hand in flowers." I'm like, look, it's not how it works. Find somebody who's fighting, ask them how it works, and respect them. If you don't fight, you know, do charity, you do humanitarian stuff, like you support the effort, you defend and take care of your home. And when there is peace, you have some respect for farmers. I mean, because they bring food to the table. People in the city stop respecting farmers who bring food to the table. City folk stop respecting people who defend them. And this is when civilization collapses, when city folk become arrogant and just stop respecting the people who built the society, like farmers and soldiers.
Okay,
Go ahead.
Ooh.
Oh, we lost him. He said he's gonna come back.
Yeah,
He's
He'll
just
be
gonna
back
reset
in a
his.
second.
He's got to reset his connection. Hopefully, he'll be back, and we'll give him
Okay.
a good long time to go through his notes and explain
Yeah.
everything.
I wasn't actually intending to completely wrestle the conversation away from him. I just wanted to make that little point that different citizen does not necessarily mean second class, and that essentially that you can have different citizens with different sets of rights and responsibilities who are equally valued and who have rights that are equitable with their responsibilities. So that's the point that I was trying to make, is first and second class isn't helpful. Habib,
Okay.
you're back.
Habib, you're back. I just wanted to let you finish your point, and then I wanted to ask you a question. Are you okay?
Can't hear anyone. So let me.
Can't hear anybody.
Back
Okay.
in a sec.
All right, no problem. Well, you know what? While I got Maria for a bit, I want to ask you a question, Maria. A lot of times people will cite the Quran, and they'll talk about how the Quran specifically words things like women, the woman serves the man, or she is second to him, or whatever. But what I wanted to ask you this, and I wanted to ask Habib this too, because he also was quoting the Quran just now, despite the fact that it may be worded like that in the book, I'm reminded of, there's stuff in the Bible that if you wanted to go through and find things that sound really damning or really messed up, you could, but in actual fact, do people actually practice any of those things in there? No, most of the time they don't. Because there's things that may be written, but nobody really, acts on rather. So the question is, from what you know, first off, what is your impression of the way the Quran writes about women, and do people that are practicing Muslims, do they actually practice that? That's basically what, like, if the Quran says this is a patriarchy, how does it actually play out?
Well, it's different in every country, right? Like in Saudi Arabia, the system is more extreme and different. Actually, it's probably one of the most extreme. So what Habib was talking about, it's like, for me, it's a completely different world, right? I grew up in Yemen. It's a very different world. So also, there is this communist head of harem. Communists and leftists are really smart. Conservatives are wonderful, stupid people. And I mean, I was also stupid. Because conservatives, why are they dumb? Conservatives are dumb because they're smart in their area, they're spending their time making their money, having their family, so they're smart in that way. They're not spending their time scheming. Most of the arguments I have heard against Islam are all leftist arguments about the patriarchy or cisgendered, everything that, is... all the arguments are very leftist. So what they do with the head of harem technique, they take one thing, one incident in one extreme case and say that's everywhere. A great example. If somebody in the ghetto of Chicago shoots up, 10 people in the ghetto of Chicago, they say, oh, this is the West, and they show this to a Chinese villager. The Chinese villager thinks, when they see a Swiss banker, oh my God, a gangster, right? And when it's really not the case. So that's one of the things. For example, what's in Saudi Arabia is not like the rest of the world, for example, I'm Sufi, but we have all sorts of people who practice religion very differently. So, and even different Sunnis, different Shia, everyone's practicing it differently. So, and when it comes to Quran, well, the Prophet Muhammad, he gave women, he paid women who are nurses, he gave them an equal share of the spoils, and women who fought. There were a couple women who fought, like, and Khansa was another woman who was actually a great fighter. So within Islam, there are quite a few women who, it was the first example of equal pay for equal work. Also, there was a genocide of female babies, and the Prophet put an end to that. He switched dowry, so he did things to make life better for women. Also in the Quran, you'll see the same things in the Bible, a bit more nicely worded towards women. For example, in the Bible, there is a warning with the Adam and Eve story, and it said that it's the woman's fault, the woman got tempted. This is deleted from the Quran. It's not there. The other thing with the Sodom and Gomorrah, there was this thing about the woman getting tempted, the woman staying back. The woman getting tempted part is deleted, and they're both equally Adam and Eve are equally responsible for the sin that is the fault of the woman in the Bible. It's equally responsible in the Quran. So, I mean, it's different in every place. It's not horribly crazy like in the media. The other thing is, I find that a lot of atheists have an agenda, and they try to use bashing Arab men, to try to destroy religion because there's some useful idiots. But in other cases, a society where religion is weak, the community is weak. The community is weak. It's very easy to conquer that country. The spirit of fighting is gone. You don't have anything to fight for. I mean, like, if everyone is going back and forth to their job in their cars in suburbia and don't even talk to their neighbors, would you fight and die for your country? But if you have like a community, people in the neighborhood, they do things for each other, they love each other, they care for each other. I mean, you'd have something to fight for. I also noticed classical music. Arab youth listen to it. Also, I noticed youth who go to church who have an Orthodox or high Catholic ritual, they like classical music, whereas kids who go to a watered-down church, like some Protestant churches, or kids who don't go to church, they don't care for classical music. The culture isn't passed down. You have a lot of things that are not passed down. So one of the big problems as an Arab women's rights activist I face is I want to talk about banning child marriage, and I got a law in to stop child marriage. So it is a difficult topic as it is. And going into those villages where, you know, they don't have contraceptives, and before in Yemen, basically they didn't have medical care either. So life and diseases would kill off the kids, and there would be 2 kids per family because diseases would kill them. Now that there is modern medicine, all of a sudden there are 14 kids and they're all alive. And so a lot of the families give away some kids as child soldiers and some kids as child brides. There are too many mouths to feed. And how to reduce child brides and child soldiers, how to get to the villages and educate them about contraceptives, those sorts of stuff, and educate them that in the village I do work with some city women trying to educate village women about reducing child marriage. The other thing is female genital mutilation. It's not an issue, not a Muslim issue, but we do have Somali refugees. And I work with, and there are also Yemeni Somalis, so I do work with Yemeni Somalis on reducing that. And it's hard enough to do that, and the worst thing I hate is these feminists who's like, let's end Islam, I'm like, you want to destroy a community? It's hard for me as a women's rights activist to fix this issue about stopping child marriage or stopping, and child soldiers for boys, right? And then people are like, oh, you know, Arab men are evil, religion is evil, let's attack, let's destroy the community. And I'm like, no, I can't do that. And then, of course, people hate women's rights activists in the beginning because they're afraid that they're going to destroy the whole society. I mean, you look at Somalia. Somalia was communist, right? And then it fell and broke apart, and people are like, "Oh my God, are you bringing this collapse of Somalia to us?" Or look at Syria. It was a atheist, Marxist system, and look at it now. I mean, these systems collapse and they fall apart. Look at the fall of the Berlin Wall. So when I attack men, when I attack religion, if I do things like that, people in the community are like, "Oh my God, are you going to destroy our society?" And so I am faced with that perception and having to say, no, I respect the culture, I respect the religion, I love you guys all, but right now, I don't think it's fair that we have child marriage and child soldiers, and you guys better start using contraception, this is how it works, that sort of stuff. There are other things like microcredit, microfinance. I don't believe in attacking men, religion, society. I believe in helping people who need to be helped. And in third world countries, often
Whoa.
the most
Maria?
Maria, you're breaking up.
vulnerable. And
Oh,
Okay. All right. I think it sounds like Maria was winding down. The Maria train has ended. Maybe it's gone into
I
station.
think so. Sorry, Maria, I want to ask you a question, but I'll wait until after Habib has offered a rebuttal. I just want to also throw in there that I know that I think Maria is a Muslim woman, and she is pious, and Habib is an atheist. But I think that this conversation about the needs of feminism in the Middle East, it doesn't really matter, whether you're religious or not, because what we're looking at is, whether or not this ideology is necessary. I mean, that may inform your decisions about that, but I'm just to clarify, in case people are watching and wondering, about that. I don't think that those things matter, because what we're looking at is, is the feminist, the feminist, I don't want to call it a movement because it's not like it's going anywhere, but the feminist ideology, if it's necessary in the third world, as many people have claimed it is. And now I'm going to give the floor to Habib, so go ahead, sir.
Okay, where do I start? God damn, it's been, and I was cut off for a little bit because of my internet, but okay, you keep talking about society and breaking off society. I don't really give a fuck about society, to be honest. Society can build itself in whatever way they want. What I want is equality under the eye of the law. Now, is there inequality under the law? Yes, no one can deny that. And if anyone would, I would say that they don't even know what equality is. Especially when those countries are taking the Quran and Sharia law to the literal meaning. Yeah, some countries might have some secular laws every now and then, but I'm talking about Sharia law in its essence and its literal meaning. When you say Rajal Qawamun an Nisa, which means men are in charge of women. There is a hierarchy here, men and then women. I don't want that. That's unfair for men. That's unfair for women. I'm not saying that men are evil because of that. I'm not saying that women should be submissive because of that. I'm just saying, no, just keep it equal. Don't demonize any of the parties and just leave it like that. And what does that entail? Let's take a look at society. And I've been tweeting about this all last week. Let's take a look at divorces. In divorce cases, a woman has no say at all. Actually, you can divorce a woman without her even being there. Her knowledge and consent are not necessary for a divorce to be enforced. And also when it comes to custody, a woman by law, by Sharia law, is not entitled for her kids at all. I'm talking like, even if the dad is the most reprehensive person ever. Now, the woman would get to keep the kids for 2 years. If the kid is a boy, 2 years just to breastfeed him and then give him to the dad. If it's a girl, then for 7 years and then gives it to the dad. No matter what, that is the absolute law. And that's written in Sharia law. So that's just inequality, because again, you need to study these kind of things case by case basis. Also, when it comes to marriages, it says here, there's a hadith that says an-nikah ruq, which means the marriages are slavery. And then it continues. It says that when you try to look for a husband for your daughter to enslave her, faqad araqaha, so he enslaved her. So look for a good master for your good daughter. That is a hadith. So there is a hierarchy that cannot be denied here. And there's a very, very loud people here, very loud sect of religious extremists that are pushing these kind of nonsense into the law books. So when you say that, yeah, inequality doesn't exist because society, well, society can build itself based on that. A woman can be all submissive if she wants. She can let go for rights, but I need the rights and equality to be under the eyes of the law. I don't care about how society deals with that. Society, right. I mean, we're always going to have hierarchy in societies. We're always going to have a manager, supervisor, and the employees and the working floor. I'm not against that. I'm not for total equality. I'm for equality under the eyes of the law.
I think what you're thinking is, okay, first, it seems to me there are problems with Sharia law specifically. So and I get that, and that's there's a lot of messed up stuff in that. The one, I guess, my next question comes in two parts. One is fighting for the equality of people is really more about fighting to give men and women the right and freedom to choose what kind of life they want, right? Not necessarily like this, and this will work to benefit both. And basically, it frees both if you can do that. And the way that Sharia law is currently constructed, according to what you're saying, according to what the Quran says, and according to those Islamic countries that have been built with the Sharia law as its sort of central core political structure that everything is built under. That is where the injustice comes from in what you're saying. Am I right in what I'm getting from that?
Yeah, exactly. I'm talking about like the countries that take Sharia law to the literal sense, and then they kind of build up upon that. And you know how religious extremes go. That like even when Sharia law just go like, hey, we're just gonna stop at like 50% patriarchy, the extremists would go like, no, we'll be more pious. Let's take it 105% because why not?
Sure.
Pious under the name of the law.
But then now, so the next part of my question is this. Despite the fact that human rights need to be fought for and we need to examine this and challenge it, but we need to do it in a way that is, I think to some degree, we have to be kind of sensitive to it because as a Westerner, I don't know enough about that culture. So the best way for me to do it, at least in my opinion, would be to go through people who either are very familiar with it, instead of people who are just passing judgment from their perspective in another part of the world, as an examination of what needs to be done, but then also looking at it as how does this system benefit and, or actually more accurately, how it benefits doesn't matter, but who, in what ways is this bad for both genders, for families, for the cycle of abusive violence, etc., and so on. But then the question becomes, is feminism what is necessary, or is something else what is necessary? Like, would human rights advocacy for men and women in an individual basis work better than simply feminists? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I agree with about, I think it's much better human rights advocacy on an individual basis, because with feminism, I see the root is man hate, hate of society. And by the way, not all hadith are correct. So, yeah, no, again, I'm not from Saudi, and the way Saudi implements Sharia in a very Victorian way, at the height of the British Empire, let's remember that Victorian England was a very authoritarian society. And they also had flogging and so on. And, yeah, an authoritarian interpretation of the Bible might be good for battle, but when it comes to daily civilian lives, you have inequality and you do have problems with that. So, but my biggest issue as an Arab woman who advocates to stop child marriage, things like that, I got my mom divorced at age 14 because I thought my father, he was disrespectful and I didn't see other fathers behaving like that. So I managed to go through all the divorce courts. It was very interesting. I found a good lawyer and I got my mom custody of myself. My mom is Russian, so yeah. So I worked the system. Let's say it's not black and white, but the biggest issue I have as a women's rights activist, and you can talk not only women's rights activists, but also sex workers struggle. It's very much the same. In addition for struggling for your rights, you have all these people talking about you and people are fighting the people talking about you. And so it's hard enough to get your right, and then you have people like, I hate men, or somebody, I want to destroy religion, I want to destroy that, and you just fighting for your basic right, or fighting to have a law to ban child marriage. You have to say, oh no, I don't hate men, I don't hate religion, I don't want to destroy society. You know, it's like so hard on top of our backs. We have all those things, and with Habib, I'm like, with all due respect, you know, like, you know, you can please keep your atheism outside of women's rights activism. That is your struggle. Yes, you can think religion is right or wrong, but for women, we work within our religion. We work among our men. We are not there to destroy society. You know, and so if you think things have to be reformed, say it. Because I'm an atheist, I think this religion is crap because it contradicts here, contradicts there, contradicts there. Like, and then you go on the backs of women. It's hard enough for us to have our rights, and then somebody puts their struggle on top. It's like we're drowning, and then we have additional weight. So I think it's really key to like separate. Western feminists want to save us from men because men are evil, and then we have to explain we're not men haters. We support even men's rights in the West, but like, I think it's important that people just respect women and just let us fix our problems in a positive, proactive way, and then gradually build with a positive momentum, one thing at a time.
Okay, can I just reply to one thing? Because you said that, hey, I need to keep my atheism outside my activism for women's rights. Now, how do I do that when it is Sharia law itself that are infringing on those equalities and inequalities? And by the way, I turned my microphone all the way up. I'm sorry, I can't hear me. I don't know. Brian, can you increase it from your controls? Because I don't have controls here. Anyway,
Brian, are
I'll start
are we? Is
talking
this
a
like a
little bit louder.
rudderless boat? Is the moment here? Do we have no Brian?
I think Brian is MIA.
Apparently,
I guess he left. All right. Well, you're just gonna have to talk really loud, Habib, because it's quite difficult to hear you over the. Actually, you know what, Duarte, I think there's some background noise coming from you. Yes. Okay. Habib, go ahead.
Can you hear me now? Is this better?
Yes, significantly.
Okay, because I'm kind of like chewing on my mic, quite literally. Where was I? Yeah, I can't really ignore my atheism when it comes to this particular thing, because a lot of the inequality comes from Sharia law. Now, in no way have I ever said that women are not free to follow Sharia law. I haven't said that men aren't free to follow Sharia law. If they want to keep the community following Sharia law, for all intents and purposes, go ahead. Get married in the Sharia way, get divorced in the Sharia way, have all women lose their kids when they get divorced at the year of 2 or 7. I don't really care. That's your option. I want the option to be there. I want options for women to be equal to men. I want men to have the options to not be responsible for women if they choose not to. Here's the key word: choose not to. Now, if they choose to be that way, that's all up to them. So yes, I cannot leave my atheism out of it, because it's a big part of it. Because a lot of the inequality comes from the Sharia law. And by the way, those laws are written in correct hadiths. I done my research. These hadiths that I just cited, they're in Sahih Bukhari or Muslim, which are kind of agreed upon in all the Islamic nations, except for Iran, but Iran are mostly Shiites.
I do want to add, though. I do want to maybe try and broaden your perspective on this. You know, as far as atheism goes, because Sharia law, Christian law, all of these sort of religious laws, right? You're an atheist. You do not believe in God, right? You believe God doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So who do you think wrote those laws? It was not God. It was not God. It was the community. It was the community that wrote those laws. And the community obviously saw some use, some functionality in those laws at the time that they were written, in order for those laws to take root and become something that was followed by the community. This is just, like, I don't think that there is that I don't think that Sharia is connected to God in the same way that I don't think that the Ten Commandments, that the majority of the Ten Commandments, you got the graven images thing and the, you shall not have any gods before me and all of this other crap, right? But you have thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness. Like you have a whole bunch of rules that actually work, that essentially come from, that have nothing to do with any religion. They're cultural universals. They exist in every single culture. That you don't take other people's shit without asking, and you don't kill people without good reason, and you don't tuck in and you treat other people the way you'd like to be treated, and all of these things, right? So I think that if we look at the law, even if it's a religious law, a religious set of laws, we have to actually examine it in the context of, this is not an edict from God. These are actually laws that were constructed by human beings who essentially said, God said this, but God didn't say it. It was people who were saying it. And for whatever reason, those particular laws, that set of values, worked for those communities of people at that time, right? And so I think that there is, you don't have to look at Sharia in terms of this is all about Allah, it's all about Islam, it's all about religious people. No, I don't think you do. So that's just kind of what I wanted to get across, is that just separate it from your atheism. You could be an atheist and believe that the laws under Sharia are functional, or that
some of them
are mostly functional. So
some of them are, some of them are not. Now, here is my problem with Sharia. In general, it is a very authoritarian regime. Like, it doesn't really give you a lot of leeway. It doesn't give you a lot of choice. There is no choice when it comes to Sharia. You're either this way or you're going to hell. And by the way, we're going to send you to hell on a chopping block.
Yes, and I think the chopping block is probably at least as scary to people as the eternal fire.
No, chopping block. Like I get. By the way, in the Sharia law books that I've been reading, I have 9 death sentences, and I still have 1 chapter out of 4 to read. So there you go, 9 death sentences.
Read the Bible. Read the Bible. I disobeyed my parents. They should have stoned me to death, right?
Yeah, I know, but
I think you have to look. Yeah, I think you also have to look at Europe, Western Europe. Okay, yes, it's authoritarian, but if you do the opposite, you have cucks. You have cucks, and what I'm seeing is that this Norwegian politician, he let a Somali refugee rape him in the ass. And then he said he felt guilty that this guy got punished for it. And he was a straight man, ended up in the hospital. You have this huge invasion of migrants into Europe. And also you have, I don't know, I think I call it like a white self-genocide. They're not having kids, so they're just wiping their race out. And then you have, they don't want to fight. They're too scared to fight abroad and fight ISIS. Merkel said she'd rather accept refugees than fight ISIS. Same with Trudeau. So they bring floods of refugees. Only 20% are Syrian. There are a bunch of rapes. And Syrian refugees tell me, the actual documented ones, they're complaining. It's like, the cops are like 5-year-old, 6-year-old girls. There's no masculinity. You know, it's like a totally anti-authoritarian pro-choice society. It's like, but you know, you have other refugees from war zones. Not all of them are even screened.
Refugees here, Maria.
I'm talking about Europe. Like, it's a freaking mess because they lack masculinity.
Okay, Maria, I wanted just to deal with some of the sound issues. Could you not? Yeah, what are you doing with us there?
Sorry, I'm trying to mute. If you can mute, that'll be good.
No, that's fine. Just don't. You seem to be eating your microphone. Periodically, just maybe not touch it as much, and then we can hear you better. So, yeah, continue.
Me or her?
Oh, I was going to have her to
Who-
continue because I interrupted her, but
Yeah, Maria, you were still talking.
so go ahead. Hello? Oh,
Okay,
we lost
let
you?
me just
Okay.
rebuttal that pretty quick. I don't
Okay.
really think that by saying that, hey, mothers should be at least considered in the court when it comes to custody laws, I'm going to end up being a cock. There's a huge gap in there. Like it's like the freaking Grand Canyon of a gap.
Okay, my mom got me my custody. So my mom got custody of me, and I found her lawyers. So I helped her divorce. So I mean, yeah, there are actually about 8
There are
cases
exceptions
where a woman.
here and there, and I take my victories when I find them. I find your case to be a victory. Yet I have a very loud sect, the extreme religious sect, that are trying to change it to the
I
status quo
agree.
of Sharia law.
I agree when it comes to the extreme religious sect, and in Yemen we do what we can to fight them. And I think the best is having balance. And my issue as a feminist, not as a feminist, but as a women's rights activist who's fighting feminists, one of our issues we've had for many years, and I'm really sorry, is that all these atheist men swoop in and then say, oh, this is why Sharia law is bad. And this is why I love Tawakkul Karman. She is Muslim Brotherhood. I disagree with her politics, I disagree with her thing, but within the Brotherhood, she said no child marriage. And she fought them tooth and nail and won. And it's allies like her, who she basically got the Brotherhood onto the street to fight for her, to get rid of the dictator. And she brought the secular people together. She brought everyone together and created and forced a compromise and said, you know what, we're not taking your religion away, but this child marriage thing, this has to go. One victory after another, and it's about creating allies and not forcing your vision of society if it's different than society. If society wants to stay religious because they look at other places that aren't, they're cucks, and so you're like, I want to keep my society strong, but I also want reforms for women without destroying my society. So I go reform by reform, law by law, and so far we're getting a lot of success in Yemen. We have women, so Saudi's interfering with the war. We have women at the negotiating table. We have women in the peace talks. We have women fighting. We have Saudi Arabia paying for women to fight, okay? So they fund women fighters in Yemen, but they can't have women driving in Saudi because it's a very Victorian society. Yemen is not very Victorian, but we're fairly religious. So it's like, I think that you have evolution, not revolution, one by one. And, it's really hard when you are a women's rights activist and saying, no more child marriage. And then we have some religious extremists like, but, the Prophet Muhammad, he married this girl when she was 9 and consummated when she was 13. I'm like, yeah, but men, when they marry, they consummate. I'm like, that's not very practical advice, right? So I'm like, yeah, what happened at the Prophet's time is the marriage got consummated after, but I'm like, men today, are not like men back then, right? And with all the porn and stuff, I'm like, this is not the way society is now, so we have to be realistic. And this approach is what got that law. We fought tooth and nail for that law. We also fought tooth and nail to have women representatives in the government. So, and yeah, my mom was one of the first women driving. We didn't have women in the government. So we have lots of positive changes. We're moving forward. And what I like about Tawakkul Karman, the last thing is she said, yeah, you bring your community with you. You bring your men with you. You bring your society up with you. You don't bring them down. So this is, what's required is not to scare everyone and saying we're going to change your whole world. It's like we carve a little space and say, you know what? This little child marriage thing, it's a problem. Other things is like, okay, I think we want more equal representation in parliament. Actually, Tawakkul Karman, that's how she started the Arab Spring in Yemen. She had protests for equal representation in parliament. Like, she brought women who were atheists, women who were religious, all together. And I think it's important to have harmony, bringing people together and saying, okay, as a women's rights activist, this is the small change I want. It's incremental. And you bring everyone together until you get this change and then the next change, and always look at how you can look at it in a loving way. I don't want to destroy my family, society, community. I want to improve life for my community, you know, and I also take into account why there is authoritarianism in a place where you need to fight, you know. This is, so you have to balance like the need for fighting, the need for masculinity, the need for authoritarianism with carving out a decent life for yourself. So there is this balance, and I do acknowledge concerns why we need authority, but I also say, you know, what else are our demands? So if you acknowledge the concerns people have and these laws of societies that survived so many centuries, the concerns are valid because those stuff work there. You try new things, you get all sorts of crazy reactions, like the Marxist system in South Yemen, it all collapsed. Or look at Somalia. So, or things are collapsing in Syria. So you need to work within the existing ecology and not disrupt everything, just one thing at a time, and make sure it works. I look at it like architecture. If you look at 60s architecture, the building rapes the sky, rapes nature. It's like, I am man and I'm dominant over everything. And it's like unharmonious. But what I really like is like Canadian Aboriginal and Native architecture, where the building fits the trees, fits the surroundings, fits the skyline. And that's the type of women's rights activism I want to build. I want it in harmony with nature, with society, and so on. So I'm looking at harmony as opposed to, hey, I want to hate men, hey, I want to destroy religion. The big problem, you know, if you're a woman, first it's hard enough to go out there and say, hey, I want to change this thing that we've been doing for centuries, because with the 21st century, it doesn't really work so well anymore. It doesn't work for a modern world.
Okay. I'm just going to get in here a bit. Oops, gotta mute you because you're then echo. So what I'm hearing is that for the most part, Habib and Maria, both of you, you've been fighting for women's rights essentially in the Middle East. You just approach it. You seem to approach it from different perspectives. And in Maria's case, she seems to, and she's dealing with a different environment, because one of the interesting things that was brought up here, and I think should be emphasized to people in the audience, is that the Middle East is not all one culture. It's not all one country with the same attitudes and the same, you know, approach to religion, and the same legal situation or even social situation for women. But what I wanted to ask Habib is, so Maria has brought up an interesting question. I mean, you have these differences in religious societies. Some religious societies, such as what she's describing Yemen, they don't necessarily follow Islam to the letter. Do you just go, and you look like you seem to want to just target religion, get rid of religion, or at least get rid of religion out of government?
No. I'm trying to get the same kind of laws that, you know, Maria's little village maybe got rid of, just to live in harmony, and those laws to be taken out. Islam can still be there, but not as authoritarian as it is in countries, and I think I emphasized that in my first few minutes when I was talking in the stream. I'm talking about countries where they take Sharia law to the literal meaning. Yes, there are a lot of countries that try to have more secular meaning to the law, and I think Yemen, because it's multicultural in a lot of ways, there's like a big Jewish community over there, there's Shiites, Sunnis, Sufis, atheists, there's all kind of people over there. But you go to Saudi Arabia, where being an atheist or being atheist is pretty much illegal by law, then yeah, oh, by the way, being Jewish in Saudi Arabia is illegal, which is weird. I don't understand that. Even though they're, like in the Quran, they're like, yeah, the people with the book, we should take care of them. But never mind, I'm just going on a tangent here. So I'm trying to get the people that are pushing the same kind of draconian laws that are followed in Saudi Arabia with the literal meaning of Sharia to be out of the picture and have more secular ruling. Now, if a society or community wants to still practice Sharia law in their day-to-day life, then that's up to them. Because I think the Sufis are the kind of ones that really emphasize on the relationship between them and their God when it comes to religion. But they're not authoritarian about it. So I shouldn't really have the mosque controlling the state and being authoritarian about things, especially when it comes to equality under the eyes of the law. And that's my approach of it. Now, if you want to be Muslim in your community, then that's fine by me. Just don't force it on me. Don't force it on my sister.
Okay, I guess the question that I'm asking is, do you think that it would be appropriate to just take Islam out of the law, out of the governing structures, or do you I guess disagree with Maria's approach from taking it on a case-by-case business or case-by-case basis?
Of course, it's not going to be like overnight. Nothing is going to work like that. Like look at all the Arab Spring revolutions that happened where they tried to turn the government and turn the ruling system overnight. It ended up in chaos. That's not how it's going to work. The reason why I keep tweeting about specific laws is because I want to target those specific laws, and once those laws are being fixed, that's the end of story. I'm not going to demonize people like, oh, back in 1989, men used to accuse women of stuff. No, I'm not going to do that. Like, that's done. We're done with that. You don't hear me talk about domestic violence in Saudi Arabia because right now we have a law against it. I'm fine with it. Done. Let's move on. Next one and next one. It's a long haul, but that's the way to do it. You take it one by one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do agree. It's incremental. My big issue is when you're like, oh, let's go. I agree with you that, yeah, if you're threatening an Arab Spring on people, they're like, whoa, and they just like stay away from, oh, will women's rights activism open the door to an Arab Spring or Somalia or something? So, yeah, no, I agree with you there. And so, but we also should address the root of authoritarianism. And it's not in an Islamic way, but in a secular way. And Houthis impose a radical version of Sharia law, while their social justice warriors say that they're queer gay rights activists and they persecute people who are gay. We do see authoritarianism not for religious, but for the secular reasons of power and ability to fight. And especially we have a region full of oil, and lots of people try to grab this oil. So we have authoritarianism, yes. I would assume with Saudi, where you have more oil, you'd have more people try to grab it, and they would pick not Sufism, but a form of religion that's more authoritarian. And I'll go back to Joseph Stalin. So Lenin had all these social experiments, and the morale of the troops went down, so he closed them, and it was like very much sexual revolution. Everyone's having sex with each other. They built apartments without kitchens, said everyone's equal, this sort of stuff. It reduced the morale of the troops. And then when Stalin got into power, he closed all those social experiments, and he imposed Puritan church morality because it worked in war, even though the religion was atheism, basically. But in World War II, he also allowed KGB agents to have the role as a pastor to basically increase the morale of the troops. So I think we should also look at, in an atheist society, authoritarianism, what is it used for? I mean, we have to address the root of the issue, which is the security.
Well, what
can we lessen authoritarianism? How would that help security concerns? Because we have to look at why they go and pick the authoritarian branch of Islam instead of picking something like Sufism to follow. I mean, there's a political reason.
I think the main reason why Saudi Arabia has had this sort of very authoritarian bent to Wahhabism and the whole bit is because of Saudi Arabia is the classic rags to riches story. It is they went in 60 years from being a country where you could literally get shot for drinking from another family's well, to being an oil-rich country rolling in money, and I think that the authoritarianism of the religious sort of aspect of Saudi society is an extreme reaction to that extreme change. I mean, I actually was looking at pictures of Saudi cities taken in 1950 versus today, right? And you know, the difference is absolutely unbelievable. It is an unprecedented amount of technological and economic advancement. You know, like you can say what you want, and the West had major fucking bumps and hurdles and problems and injustices and all of those things wrapped up in our industrial revolution and all of that stuff, right? And there was a huge amount of accommodation and adjustment that needed to happen within the 200 years in which all of that went down, right? And it seems like in Saudi Arabia that happened, that sort of got compressed into a very, very brief period of time. And there is, I think, an understandable clinging to old ways, clinging harder than you did even before all of this change started, right? But what I did want to say is that if you are looking at changing a law that says men are in charge of women, in order to actually do that in a just way, in order to actually do that in a fair way, you also have to target the part of the law. There is a sister law in there somewhere that says that men are responsible for women, right? And you have to get rid of both at the same time. Otherwise, you're going to end up going the exact same fucking path as the West. And the problem that I see, right, for every single human rights advocate or civil rights advocate in the Middle East, in the Third World, is that it is so easy to see that unfairness, that women must be subordinate to their husbands, right? To the men in their lives. It's so easy to see that and see it as an injustice and want to get rid of it. And it is so difficult to see the sister law, right? The sister law that men are responsible for women. It's so difficult to see that as an injustice. And that's why we, in the West, we freed women from the subordination, right? And 150 years later, we still have not freed men from their obligations, you know, according to those sister laws, those sort of the other side of the coin, right? And what I think is really something that you guys are going to need to keep a major eye on, and not because I think that you're unaware of these things, that you are not cognizant of the other side of the coin, right? But it's very easy to convince people to liberate women. It's really difficult to convince people to liberate men, right? And if you liberate women without liberating men, then you really are creating two different classes of citizens. Not different citizens, but first and second class citizens. Ones that have responsibilities, and the other that has rights. And that is not the way to go.
Someone is echoing somewhere.
Yeah, that
That's
was
okay.
Maria. I got her.
Alison, get in there.
Yeah, I
Okay.
just wanted to just add a bit on to what Karen was saying, and the sister laws are often not even sister laws. It's a simple, like it's a function of human psychology. When we perceive people as having agency and power, so when you put Saudi men or Muslim men in control, and we socially recognize that they are in control of their wives, which is an interesting position to be in because most adults can manage to exert considerable influence in their relationships regardless. But whatever, when you put a Arab man in control of his wife according to Sharia law, you actually put him psychologically in a category called actor, and you put her in a category called acted upon. And these are really powerful social roles, and they have some correlation with gender roles, but not entirely. And when you do that, you actually give her a dominance in terms of emotional compassion for her needs. So in other words, you put her needs above his by doing that. And this is just an aspect of human psychology. When you create a social hierarchy like that, you basically invert. Through moral typecasting, there is a more shadow inverted hierarchy with her on top. In other words, you put him in control, you center her needs. And this is something that is very seductive for women. And I've spoken to you before, Habib, and you've mentioned that there are a lot of women who oppose your work in trying to create and try to deal with these laws that put women in a position of supposed subordination. This is why they oppose it, because on a level they know that being in the subordinate position puts them in a dominant position when it comes to their needs in the relationship. Now, this isn't always true because you can end up with a man who's extremely abusive, but in many cases it is true.
They're talking from the bottom. They're talking from the bottom.
Okay, and this is part of the shadow system, and the women who want to keep that power, because this is giving them power. By putting men in the actor position, it centers women as the judgment, as the measuring stick for men's actions, and that is a power, and they know it. They know it's a power, and they enjoy that power. So the real threat in the future going forward to the work that you're trying to do to create equality, true equality, women having the rights as men and the responsibilities of men, is not a woman like Maria who will take on the responsibilities as well as the rights, but women who are happy in the supposedly submissive role. Because when you strip away the social the expectations, like this whole construct where men are in charge but they are centered, their needs are centered. When you strip that law, that expectation away, they're going to want to retain that power. And what they're going to grab onto, and these are the women, in Victorian England who would be considered the submissive wives, supposedly, the ones who were fine with the idea that a man was in charge of everything, because they knew it centered their needs and gave them this kind of power. These women are going to grab for it again, and what they're going to grab for is feminism, because feminism explains why women's needs need to be centered at all costs, throughout all time, in any situation, because they are always victims of men. And I think this is what part of what Maria is worried about with just a purely like an atheistic solution, is that you get rid of all of this and you invite this what is essentially a religion, feminism. You invite it in because these women want to grab onto the power it gives them. And I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay. We can keep going. I'm gonna
let Habib answer.
Yeah, Habib, if you want to respond, that's fine. I was gonna ask him a question anyway.
I was writing notes. It would be a waste of notes if I didn't respond to both of these statements. First of all, the matter of Saudi Arabia being the way it is just because we found modernization 60 years ago, that's kind of false. Same thing happened to the UAE. Dubai is one of the most liberal cities in the Middle East. So that's not an excuse. Bahrain was the same thing. Actually, in the case of Dubai, I think the UAE was formed as a country back in 1972, so it's less than 60 years. So Saudi Arabia, no, you're actually way behind even in that. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to give them that excuse at all. And when it comes to rights and responsibilities, the same ayah, the same verse actually says both. When you say Rijal Qawamun and Nisa, Qawamun is basically not just only in charge, but also responsible for women. So you're responsible for their feeding, for their clothing, for everything. They are your property and your responsibility. Their well-being is your responsibility. And that is the part of law that I'm trying to get rid of. Not just because it is putting men above women, it's also putting men in charge of women's well-being, which is unfair to a lot of men. Those
No,
that cannot make enough money to
I
take care of
totally
their
agree.
women.
I totally agree.
I agree with that. But
Yeah, because you kept talking about a sister law that I need to look for.
no,
It's
but
all in there. It's in the same verse.
but the problem is okay, and please take my word for it as a Western woman who has seen this happen over and over and over and over and over and over and over again in my culture, is that your culture will be happy. It won't be happy, but if there is a portion of that law, right, that they are willing to do away with, it will be the portion where women are subordinate to men. And if there is a portion that they are prepared to keep for 150 years after that first portion was done away with, it will be the portion assigning responsibility to men, right? That is just the way it is going to go. And this is the really horrible thing about it, is that this is not your fault. This is not Maria's fault. This is not the fault of any individual activist who sees the problem with both aspects, both sides of the coin, right? The problem, I mean, we even had Warren Farrell, who is very, very prominent in the men's rights movement. He was twice elected to the New York City's chapter of the National Organization for Women, to their board of directors, and he was extremely involved in the feminist movement. He made millions being an activist for feminism, for political lobbyist feminism, right? And he said that when he was involved with NOW, the National Organization for Women, the board members, right? So the really elite, the high achieving women who were really willing to, put it all on the line for equality. They essentially were saying, well, we're never going to get wage parity in the workforce. We're never going to get wage equality in the workforce if we do not have equality at home in terms of childcare and domestic duties, particularly after divorce, right? Women are always going to suffer a wage disadvantage if they're saddled with, custody of the children. So we need to fight against this. We need to push against this whole idea of women being the proper caregivers for children and women getting default custody, and we need to fight against this, right, in order to get women wage parity with men. And he was totally behind that. He was like, that makes sense, right? If parental duties in the home are split 50-50, then it frees up both parents to earn as much as each other and the whole bit, right? Yeah, except for that the membership would not tolerate it, right? The membership said, yeah, no, you got to be fucking kidding, lady. We want full custody of our kids. We want sole custody. And we're going to get it. And you're going to support it. And if you don't, we're going to stop paying you, right? Our membership dues. And so essentially what you had happen was it wasn't necessarily the people who were actually spearheading the activism who ended up saying, oh yeah, no, we want women to continue getting like default sole custody. Oh yeah, that's totally our thing. That we want that to be our mandate. No, they were actually against that. But because it was politically and financially expedient, because the broader membership, the less politically active members of the National Organization for Women, the 500,000 or so of them, right? They were not willing to tolerate that. They changed their entire platform, and they changed. They essentially said, yeah, no, we want default custody for women. We want women to get sole custody. We want to promote sole custody arrangements, right? So essentially, what you have is you have a very, very, very thin layer of fair-minded people, right, who are pushing for these changes, and then the plebs, right, are going to hijack it to do what they always wanted to do, which is going to be, as it was in the West, as went down in the West, giving women more rights, giving women more freedoms, not assigning any extra responsibilities or obligations onto them, maintaining men's responsibilities and obligations, taking away their privileges and taking away their rights. That's just the way it's going to go.
Well, yeah, and part of the reason why is because right now you're finding the biggest, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of the opposition to women's rights from women, and it's these women who know that they get power from being in the quote-unquote subordinate position, and when they no longer have that power, they are going to want it, and they are going to seek it out, and feminism will be there. And
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Although we do have to. Oh yeah, go ahead, Habib, and then we probably should get going.
The vast majority of my opposition, yes, there is a large quantity of women, but I never said there are the majority of my opposition. The opposition is most of the time men and parts of the religious sect.
Well, that's what I was actually.
Yes.
I was going to ask you that because it seems to me that from what the conversations we've had before about this, what you find yourself up against mostly is the religion itself. It's the clerics, right?
Yes.
And they're like the biggest problem, and that makes a lot of sense. And then when I was thinking about that, and of course, you know, as Alison was saying, there are women that don't want to give up the way they got it. They like it, you know. Maybe they're not comfortable with having to, you know, move beyond that. And then there are men also that are comfortable with things as they are because that's what they know. But what I also want to, another thing that I find interesting is the flip of that. So I know that you're dealing mostly with the clergy when you're basically saying, look, I want to teach women how to drive, and the church is like, no, you're gonna go to jail now because that's not cool. Maria is also trying to advocate for women's rights, and she's not just fighting against the clergy, I imagine, but she's also fighting against feminists. Now, this is weird, right? And am I right, Maria, about that? Because you said that your opposition is also feminists. Is that correct?
Yeah.
What was that?
Yeah, yes.
Now, this is crazy because why would feminists, and I just want a brief response from both you and Habib about this because then I got to move on to GOT. Why would feminists oppose you bringing, you know, more rights and advocacy to women? If that's what they're all about.
Well, there are different types of feminists who go and attack because that's not what they're all about. They want their system, right? So they're like, oh, you have to have it exactly like in Scandinavia or you guys are barbarians. And I'm like, well, in Scandinavia, your guys can't even protect women from rape by refugees. So, like, and our criminals go in...
Oh, you're breaking up. Maria.
Yeah, you're breaking up.
Maria.
Maria, you're breaking up.
Go into Europe.
I'm gonna have to mute her.
And they start raping.
Unfortunately, to anybody who's listening, part of the reason why we have such issues on streams like this is because of the just the sheer logistics. Like people going across the Atlantic.
Yeah.
Makes it often increases the likelihood of issues and problems.
Yeah, and we apologize for Robo Maria, but and then Habib, I just wanted to confirm that, you know, what I was saying. You're up against the clergy, and then of course some men and women that don't really want change or they like things as they are. Is that correct? Habib, are you there?
Oh, so it's like someone cut the line over the Pacific or something.
Well, I'm gonna move on, but maybe we'll come back to you guys if you're still. Oh, he dropped out.
Okay. It's just technical issues, and again, it's because of the long distances involved.
Yeah, it's the distances and the vols are being stretched to their. All right, well, let's move on to. Habib is back.
I'm sorry.
Let's move on.
No, wait, he's here. Did you want to respond real quick to what I was saying?
Respond real quick is, okay, yes, I'm fighting against the clergy. Maybe Maria is fighting against feminists, but it's one word, authoritarianism. Yes, it's just a different kind of authoritarians. They're going like, you got to be like Europe, or otherwise you're kind of you're shit. And people assume that I am like, yeah, you got to be like the West or you're shit. I'm just like, no, just give people options. Don't be authoritarian. Be secular, not sectarian. And that's it.
Yes, no, that's totally fair, and again, I think that we got a lot out of this.
That's
okay,
a beautiful way to put it.
It is
secular rather than sectarian. No, that's gorgeous.
All right,
okay.
But we need to get to.
Yes, so I want to move on to Jyoti because this is another a bit of a more unique case. Jyoti, are you there? Jyoti Tiwari from India, are you there?
Hello. Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. Hello. Okay, so. All right, so like the idea of what a third world country is actually kind of, it appears to be relatively arbitrary, but because some sources I found say India is, some say it's not. But the point is this, India doesn't really have Islam in the presence at the level that it is in places like the Middle East we've been talking about. But this is a completely different system. And so the question is, are there inequalities between men and women? Are there issues that both men face and women face? And then is feminism what is necessary, or is it something else?
Okay. When you say Islam is not here, Islam is very much here, and as I was telling everyone that we Indians are like very, very complicated here. We have our laws, but then Muslims follow their Sharia law here also, specifically in matrimonial cases. And then we have special marriage act for specially designed for Christians and Muslims and others. Hindu and Sikhs follow that Hindu, marriage act and all. Okay, so you are asking whether feminism is needed here or not. See, I don't think so, because if you see the kind of problems people face here, I say people because the problem is equal for men and women here. But when this feminist wave started, it was propagated that women are suppressed, kind of different kind of things were spread from here. But it is not correct. If you see rape as a crime, so there are murders also. There are rape of men also, which is not even considered a crime in Indian Penal Code. So it's all the same. Men are suffering, women are suffering. So basically, we needed same laws and same kind of humanitarian approach. But when the laws were formed, when the these groups, they became so strong, these feminist groups, so they made a different they made special different IPC for women. There is 498A specifically designed for women. Then there is no domestic violence law for men. If you see the Muslim countries, even they have a domestic violence. Recently I came to know there is a specific DV law designed in Pakistan for men, but in India we don't have that, and there are all laws designed towards women. If you see kind of problems, as I am again and again saying, it's same for men and women. It's not like that some specific problems are for women only, and if there were those so-called problems, there were solutions too.
So wait, so in Saudi Arabia there are now domestic violence laws, but in India they don't have them, or they just don't work the same way? GOT, did you hear what I said?
Yes, we don't have a DV law for men. Fathers do not get. It's same everywhere. Fathers do not get custody here. Mother is the natural guardian, and the 490, the very, very black listed law 498A is here. Then there is maintenance laws, all designed towards women. Courts are biased towards women. If you see the kind of crime rate, it's all together same. Murders are same, rapes are same, thefts are same, but rapes are specifically looked like differently, and that too rape of woman only. There is no law which a man can use for rape. And woman to men rape is not even given that attention or even considered, or there is nothing for men basically.
That actually that matches what I've heard from Deepika Bhardwaj. That essentially the laws on interpersonal violence, all of the laws on interpersonal violence, so domestic violence, sexual violence, all of those kinds of things, dowry abuse, the whole shebang, that all of these laws are designed to protect women, and that there is essentially no protection for men.
And you know what? I would like to add one more thing here. When you talk about dowry law, dowry is a very, very broad aspect. If I start talking about it, it'll take hours to talk. In ancient India, it was designed to give property rights to women. It became complicated in today's era. If you see, all the expensive marriages are happening. They are having all kinds of designer weddings and all. They didn't stop that. They just made a law to harass men. If you see the dowry law, it says any cruelty with women by the husband and husband's relative, which means husband's mother and sister is also involved. If I say that my brother's wife is torturing me, there is no law to protect me, but my brother's wife can go and file a case against me. They have actually discriminated among women, which is a very, very special thing here, and nobody knows about it. World doesn't know about it.
One of the things Deepika said that she's actually seen cases of dowry abuse and domestic violence where an entire family was implicated. Even 5-year-old children, 5-year-old siblings of the husband were named in the criminal report, and so like essentially you have a case of a woman making a complaint against her husband, and her husband's entire family, teenage sister, little brother who's 5 years old, all of his parents, everybody is now implicated in that complaint, and they are all on the hook for that, and all to protect women against dowry abuse. I mean, I remember like 20 years ago watching TV and seeing documentaries on burning brides and selective abortion in India and all kinds of things like that. And those I think are all problems that should be dealt with. But what seems to be the case is that they've essentially eliminated due process, right? They did what Canadian feminists are suggesting we do with our sexual assault laws, which is let's just use a parallel court system with no due process, no presumption of innocence, and a lower burden of proof, and we'll just deal with it all this way, right? Rather than actually looking at just attacking things on a case by case basis, and trying to find justice, in terms of when a real injustice has happened, when a real horrific thing has happened. And so, what seems to be the case in India is we have this, again, it seems to be like an extremely fast change from what was an extremely traditional society. I mean, even now, I think, sex outside of marriage is frowned on socially, and not really, it's not really accepted, and all of these things, right?
But you know what? But you know what? Adultery is not a crime for women. If you see, adultery, you cannot implicate a wife into adultery, but a man can be blamed. Also, yes. I would like to add one more thing here. A few days back, I went to a national channel and I was talking to these panelists. Everyone was feminist there, of course. I was the only one talking pro men. So I just simply asked the most powerful feminist here, Miss Ranjana Kumari. I asked her, ma'am, don't you think the problems are actually same for men and women? Her straight reply was, man doesn't need it, which explains all. They don't even consider men human. How will they, talk about, how will they talk about the whole society here? Because men are integral part. They don't even, consider this fact. So feminism is not at all the answer for India, at least.
Well, I think like as I was saying, like the changes, the actual changes in the law, in legislation happened so suddenly. It was almost like feminism was like this import. It was like, okay, we're gonna bring freaking cane toads to India the way we brought them to Australia, and now it's just infesting the entire fucking country, and causing all kinds of problems, right? This seems to be what happened with India, is that you have cultural norms being very chivalrous, very very much traditional, very much, women deserve protecting because we see them as, as being at a disadvantage in many ways, so they deserve this extra protection. Yet at the same time, the legal system has overshot that, and has massively, in a very brief, since 1985, I believe, has massively overshot the mark of protecting women against the cultural disadvantages that they face, and completely leaving men behind. And it just seems like this sort of imported artificial change, brought about by sort of Western feminism, Western values, and all of the rest, and India sort of embracing that and saying, oh yeah, no, protect the women, protect the women. And I think this is one of the reasons why India has one of the strongest men's rights movements, one of the most visible men's rights movements in the world. You don't really see massive groups of men, hundreds or thousands of men, gathering at, in Washington D.C. or, in San Francisco or in Ottawa in front of the Parliament buildings. You don't see them standing there with signs demanding that their rights be acknowledged and dealt with, and their issues. In India, you see those things. You see men who have very, very suddenly, and this is what Milo Yiannopoulos says has happened in the West. No, it didn't. It was a gradual, slow boil for the last 150 years. Things have not flipped recently. They flipped 150 years ago. We just didn't notice. But because it happened so suddenly and so quickly, I think, over the past 50 years or so in India, you actually have men noticing that, this isn't just the new normal. This fucking sucks. This is fucking retarded. This is like not okay. And you actually have men standing up and protesting. And I think that's one of the most amazing things about India, is that you actually have this active, very, very vibrant community of men's activists actually pushing for this stuff. And from what you say, very, very necessary that they're there doing that. So,
GOT, I wanted to ask you, do you think that there are things that that could be advocated for on the part of women? And if so, again, this goes back to, is there a difference in your mind between women's rights advocacy and feminism?
Yes, there is actually a very very clear difference. Definitely, everyone's rights need to be protected, and of course there may be some areas where the work should. But but it is not all over India. If you ever come to India or read about India, there is so much diversity. New Delhi is too advanced. Then there is one state, Uttar Pradesh. Maybe some village of Uttar Pradesh is so backward that the women have to go far off and take water from the wells, that kind of area. So yes, work should be done there. We are totally with the thought that the protection of rights in such areas should be there, but it shouldn't be like everywhere same. It is not done. For the small village, the countryside, from the New Delhi, same laws everywhere, same principles everywhere. Is not done. And that village also, I would like to add, if there is a village there where a woman has to do all the hardship, her man also is doing same hardship, under the sun. He's farming, or he's going for labor, he's going to make a building, he's a laborer. So it's not like that man is having a very lavish life and wife is having hardships. It should be taken a different approach now, because when it all started, you were talking about this Indian culture. If you deeply read the mythology and the stories of Indian culture, there were women who were going to the war field. Okay, there were women who were doctors in ancient time also. But when this modernism, after say when British left India, when this modernism attacked India, it was propagated everywhere that women were suppressed. The attackers from the all the sides. That time also men protected women. They died in the wars. They protected women and children. They made rules. They made rules to protect women. Okay, culturally, women were still there in the independent. If you see the culture, women were part of the independence struggle. They were part of the colleges and schools in that time also. And when this modernization happened, men were there who thought that women should come forward. They should work. They should go out. It is not gonna work that women are staying at home, men are going for work. They should come forward. And when these women, when they came out and they started looking at things at this perspective, they just propagated this thing. I don't know where exactly it all started, that they propagated that men were suppressing women, and men were having all the fun, and women were so helpless and poor and all. It's like saying that a poor laborer's wife is very poor. But if you see the laborer, he is also very poor. You see his situation also. So it was propagated like that. And you can see what is happening all around us. There is a reservation for women. There are women special auto taxis, special coaches and train for women. Still they are crying that they are not getting enough rights. Nobody listens to them. It is not like that. It's just like you are not giving them enough responsibilities. When you give rights, you should give responsibility also. Woman has a right to say no when dowry is demanded at the time of marriage. No woman says no. All the gifts and everything are exchanged. Women give gifts, women take gifts. But when a dispute happens between, I'm just giving you an example of how it all starts. When a dispute starts between husband and wife, it is always ended up in dowry or domestic violence allegations. It is not true. There can be other reasons also. But then scores are settled, of course, in the name of dowry and domestic violence. And in other cases also, there is such a strong rape law. When a woman files for rape, no investigation is made. Directly the man is arrested. So you can see any woman can anytime accuse a man that, if you don't do this favor to me, I will accuse you of rape. No medical certificate is needed. Women can always deny that I will not go for the medical certificate and all. So basically, if you see, it all started like give rights to women, but it became what, it's everywhere, I think, in West, East, everywhere it is like that. That it is only it is suppression of men and giving all rights to women. It shouldn't be like that. There is not a single men's commission where a man can go and tell his problems. And you were saying that men's right groups are, standing up here. They're also, what they did is this Special Marriage Act and Sharia, which made things easy for other men, other religion men, because India is a country, cosmopolitan kind of country. We have Sikhs here, we have Hindus here, Christians here, Buddhists here, everyone is there, but they have different laws. So what happens in such a case when there is a protest, a group of men will stand up, others will think it doesn't affect me, why should I go and protest? So they very cleverly they drafted these laws. And see what the mess is happening here. Everyone knows what is happening here. Yes, women, men, both need, protection. Feminism is definitely not the answer, at least for India.
I think that's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, that's quite comprehensive. I want to thank you for that. And as we're making our tour around Zawardo, I want to also bring Anna Cherry, our very own Anna Cherry, to talk about Moldova, which I am familiar with a woman from Moldova, and I want you to tell us about that, and basically related to the overall topic from your knowledge. So we're going far away from the Middle East and India, but this is good.
Yeah, somewhat. We're going all the way to Eastern Europe, and theoretically it's a second world country according to nationsonline.org, and I'm looking at the literacy level and infrastructure level, and I can see that, I can see why it's second world. So
yeah, usually though this is it's a bit arbitrary because some, there's no hard and fast rules as to what is a third world country. But go ahead.
True. But yeah, the Republic of Moldova is where I was born and lived in until I moved to California specifically, but the United States with the green card lottery win that my family had. So Moldova used to be part of Romania, and it's between Romania and Ukraine. Super tiny wine country, and we definitely also have the distinction between city people and then country people, but it's not nearly as drastic as Maria was discussing in terms of Yemen. But the way I grew up anyway was in the era that I was born right before the fall of the communist sort of empire, and Moldova became part of communism. And it was independent. It became independent in '91. So I was 3 to 4 years old. And after I remember the change from whatever we used before that I don't remember to these coupon thingies that were weird. And people stood in line for bread, and I was the only time I've ever seen that pretty much was when in the process of transition. But then after that, Moldova got its own money, and things changed, and it was different, and it was kind of a mix of Russian and Romanian people. And you had more Romanian people living in the countryside, and more Russian speakers and Ukrainians, which are basically also Russian speakers for the most part, living in the cities. And the way I grew up was in a very sort of, I guess, not technology, but just education in general, education-minded family. Even though my grandparents weren't particularly, they weren't doctors or anything. My parents are, but my grandparents were, they were part of the communist era, and they got sent all over the Soviet Union. Sorry, my alarm. And then they got, my grandmother was working as an agricultural engineer. My grandpa was just driving a truck. And they got a apartment in Moldova as part of the USSR thing that gave all its working people apartments, but you didn't necessarily have any control over where you were put. So my Russian grandparents were put in Moldova, and then my mom married a Moldovan guy, blah, blah, who cares? And they divorced, and then we moved, and it doesn't matter. But growing up, I had a experience that was kind of metropolitan and European, I would say, in the sense that even though it was a country that went through communism and went through upheaval and had all those problems, it wasn't exactly involved in any wars. So we had and I wanted to stress that's something that Maria was saying, that there is a very, very big difference between a country approach of a country when it's in wartime versus peacetime. And so there are certain attitudes of don't be a cuck, don't do this, don't do that, close your borders. There are these ideologies that float around, certainly not the more liberal circles, but libertarian to conservative circles, and that mentality is useful in times of war. It's actually necessary to maintain safety and morale of troops, etc. But then when you go into a period of economic growth and peace and things like that, you do kind of have to switch attitudes, because otherwise you just don't really play well with countries around you and bad things happen. But anyway, I grew up with an idea that you could do pretty much whatever you wanted. So I don't remember ever being told, this is the law, this is what you have to do. As a woman, you stay in the kitchen. That wasn't a thing at all. But I grew up around my mother and my grandmother. My grandmother, cooked, even though she kind of hated it, even though she made amazing food. And she did a lot of sewing, and she basically sewed on the shirts that my grandpa wore, and she stayed at home basically to take care of me, because my mom was in medical school when she had me, and she was way too young and couldn't take care of me herself. She was like 21 in the middle of medical school, just starting. So my grandma had to take early retirement and take care of me, and grandma did very traditional female role things. And whenever barbecues or whatever gatherings happened, women did the preparing of the table while men roasted the meat. So it was very like gender divided, you would say, in a way, based on, if you look at people, you see that women do certain things and men do other things. But then the second layer of that, because it was a metropolitan city and we were growing and developing, it was women were working. My mom was a doctor. There was really no ceiling or anything like that feminism has brought into the conversation that was happening in that, third to second world, whatever transition that Moldova was doing. And it's really interesting to me that a lot of people from Russia and by extension Moldova too, they kind of look at this feminism movement as, like you kind of have to be crazy to be part of this whole, like, feminine is kind of a good example of what an average person from my neck of the world sees radical feminism as. Is these like somewhat, is not special, people where they kind of have something very extreme and weird going on. And growing up, when I was in my teenage years, girls that were like, I'm a proud man hater. There was like one or two of them, and they were like super fringe, and feminism was associated with man hater. It was a thing. It was a persona, I suppose, and there was really no need for legitimate feminism to help women get out of whatever, because there was nothing to get out of, even though some women chose to take traditional roles and wanted to get married and kind of carried on this very traditionalistic, religious kind of attitude of like, I have to, be a wife and a mother and have kids and do the thing with the church. Even though communism abolished, quote unquote, religion, it still became an underground force in terms of superstition. And like, even though Russia wasn't communist, my grandma still believed in all that stuff and had icons everywhere. So religion's another aspect, as we were talking earlier between Maria and Habib. There is an element of society that you can't just really push religion out completely when it's a big part of people's identity, because just abolishing religion to turn to atheism, it creates another religion. It doesn't do away with that sort of system that humans develop.
Yeah, I mean, if you burn down a church, the priests and nuns don't become atheists as a result.
Basically,
essentially.
Yeah. Essentially, and so yeah, those ideas were all carried across, as well. So there's a lot of things that go into this sort of attitude. Even though we have the Bible and, as we were saying, the Quran, I'm not sure, I didn't get quite clear answer on this, but we have passages that say women must be subservient to men, women must do this, men rule over women, and stuff like that. But then when you look around you, Christians don't behave like that. They don't. There's maybe some fringe groups like, I don't know, Westboro Baptist, where they have a patriarch who tells everybody what to do. But it's. Can
I ask you, Anna, do you remember if Moldova, where you lived, was it a very religious? Like, did they have a big focus on religion? But was it very religious in the way that people did things? Because I know you mentioned that it was there's a traditionalist sort of,
well, that's just how people lived. People just happened to live in a way that kind of corresponded more with the conservative family unit, nuclear family unit, like, very kind of against tattoos and, more an older sort of not hyper modern attitude. And I mean, that's why kind of religion came back with a vengeance after being suppressed, because you still have a conservative majority of people who believe that gayness is kind of a unraveling of society, and that having tattoos, especially on your face, just straight up means you went to prison, and or like we're a sailor if you have a tattoo on your arm. They still have kind of, or at least 10, 15 years ago, obviously modern people my age, millennials, etc., obviously they have very different attitudes. They have tattoos, they don't give a fuck. It's
Sure.
yeah, but it's interesting that we were still very like city minded and modern and believed in technology and didn't do like religious stuff, but on the other hand people still were people who like women did the women things, men did the men things. It's still kind of the gender roles were a little bit more distinct. There was not that much of a gray zone because it was a more conservative society that did punish flamboyancy unless you were like that one guy on TV who somehow made it. And though growing up, etc., religion was kind of a side thing. Like there was a church, and my grandma would like watch the Easter overnight, whatever mass service, Orthodox thing, and that was like one time a year that religion would happen. It was on Easter, and like
yeah, Easter's big in the Ukraine. Yeah, I asked that because no, not in Moldova, but also the Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And I did ask that because I live near a sort of Ukrainian. They call it Ukrainian village.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically all Ukrainians live there, and they all go to church all the time. And Easter is huge, and they're very, very Orthodox. And so that was the main reason why I asked.
Ukrainians are fucked up that way. I'm sorry, Ukrainians are fucked up that way.
Yeah.
My boyfriend's grandmother died a year and a half ago, and I sat through her funeral service at the fucking Ukrainian Orthodox Catholic Church, or whatever the fuck, Ukrainian Catholic, church. And it was 3 hours of the priest bitching everybody out for not coming to church enough. Nancy was a good Catholic. Nancy took the Eucharist. Even when Nancy was too sick to come to church, she still took the Eucharist and put money in the collection plate. Oh my goodness, it's 40 below outside and 20 below in here because I can't even fucking keep the heat on because none of you assholes are coming to church enough and putting money in there. I can't pay my heating bills. What the fuck is wrong with you? That's essentially what her entire fucking funeral service was.
Oh, I know.
2 hours of that and standing up and sitting down and standing up and sitting down and standing up and sitting down.
Yep, that sounds like Catholic Church, all right.
Well, it's interesting. Catholics was fairly new to our whole situation because growing up, I knew about mosques, so I knew about Middle Eastern religions and I knew about Jewish religions a little bit, and of course Orthodoxy because that's sort of Jewish in ways. Because it's Orthodox, and there are words for it that I knew, but I didn't know the word for the word that just totally slipped my mind. Catholicism, there we go. I didn't know the word for a church of the Catholic peoples, and when it was introduced to me in teen years, I was like, whoa, what is this? This is weird. So Catholic thing was kind of like new, and after I left, but almost 15 years ago, the new religion that started creeping in was the missionaries of the Baptist thing, and that's like my grandpa, who still lives in Moldova, likes to joke about those Baptists. He's like, oh, you don't drink, you don't smoke, what are you, a Baptist? And it was just funny that that's his perception of Baptists over there. But I just really quickly wanted to get back to the point of does the third/second world need feminism? And to go off of something that Jyoti was saying, a lot of times you would think that, okay, the third world or the Middle Eastern countries or India, that's the places where, that's where female oppression still exists, or like, where women wear burqas and they're like all covering up, except you realize that they're covering up so that the men don't rape them, basically, in a way, and that their purity and their womanness isn't stolen by people who aren't their husbands. So in a way it's actually protecting female virtue, which is women are invested in that themselves. And then the whole thing about driving, women actually don't want to drive themselves, so it is an element of privilege that the West sees as a detriment. And then in India, you have so many, at least from what I understand, seeing TED Talks from people who are active in India and things like that. There's a growing like mobile phone thing. Like everybody gets a mobile phone. It's like Oprah in India. It's like everybody gets a mobile phone. All women get connected. Women projects for women to do this, projects for women to do that. There's a huge, massive, insane outreach that is supporting women in Africa, in India, in a variety of third world countries. And it's not feminism. It's just economics and wanting to improve your subordinates to your peoples. Is just something that technology does, education does. It's just something that happens, and it's just interesting that feminism comes in and is wanting to ride the coattails of something that these countries are already doing and have been doing for the past 15, 20 years. And so it's just interesting and kind of disingenuous that they're trying to save women or help women when progress has already been going on without them. And in fact, they muddy up waters entirely a lot of times with introducing things that are not sensitive to Middle Eastern cultures or to religious cultures. They just don't get it. So, yeah, anyway. Yeah. That's my mic drop. QED.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Thank you. All right, so GOT's got to leave. So I want to first say goodbye to GOT. I want to thank you for taking the time to come on. And then I just want to drive this point home. It appears that in the case of India, what we're looking at... What?
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say goodbye to GOT. But in the case of India, this could be what happens when feminism runs wild. And then you couple it with things like the caste system and gynocentrism and whatnot. And real quick, GOT, I know you need to leave, so if you want to comment on what I said and give some final words.
Okay, I would just like to say thank you very much for inviting me here. It was such a wonderful experience to talk to all the beautiful people here. Namaste from India.
Oh, well, thank you.
Okay.
All right, have a good one. Enjoy your day at work. Okay, and then I guess Alison, you wanted to say do some final things too. I don't know if yeah. Okay, cool. I'm gonna put this map up, display to everybody, or if you could, yeah.
Yeah, here we go. This is the CEDAW map. If you don't know what CEDAW is, and I still have it on it, it's the Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Just take a look at it. It's an interesting map. And just note where I don't know if you can see my can you see my pointer? Yes, no, maybe.
Yeah, I do. I see it.
Okay, all right. So just note where the darker green is where the discrepant behavior, government behavior concerning women. So where they think that it's really problematic, as they would say, and that the government is actively discriminating against women. Now that you've looked at this particular distribution of basically, I mean, you could argue that feminism has created sort of a moral schema in which some cultures and societies and governments can be considered to be lesser or inferior, and it's entirely consistent with the original schema or the original etymology of feminism, judging culture and society by its treatment of women, in exclusion to its treatment of men.
Okay. I just want to add. I just want to mention something because on this map we have here we have North Korea, right? Dark green. South Korea, light green, right?
Yeah.
Okay. In South Korea, there is conscription. It's not just selective service. It's conscription for men only. And in North Korea, okay, in North Korea, what you have is you have a situation now where men are required by law, right, to report for work assigned by the government, because the government is the only employer, right? So men are required to report for their assigned job, no matter what, and if they do not report for that work, they will be put in prison, okay? And you have women who do not have this same requirement. So essentially men are slaves of the state, and women are free to engage in black markets and cottage industries and all kinds of things. So essentially what you have in North Korea is you have a situation where women can earn 10 to 100 times what their husbands are able to earn when their husbands are actually being paid, because some months the government just can't make payroll and just says, oh, well, we're just not paying you this month, right? But you got to show up for work every day because if you don't, you go to jail, right? Okay. This is the situation in North Korea, is that men are forced to work for the state every day. Period.
Not even conscription just for a certain period of time. Just conscription their entire life from day one.
Entire life. And their wives are free to engage in cottage industries and black markets that bring in 10 to 100 times the amount of money and productivity into their households, right? And you actually have women complaining that their husbands are dead weight.
Oh, yeah.
You literally have women complaining about having to bear the financial burden for the family in North Korea. I can't believe he's just useless. He's just fucking useless. Well, you know why?
Because he's legally disenfranchised relative to you. But yes, this is the CEDAW map, and it does not have any, like, there's no context here. This is basically just comparing women to women when you look at it. So the situation of women in North America is compared to the situation of women in Yemen. And they just make the decision whether or not women are treated better. And it has absolutely no, as Karen points out, it has absolutely no relation to how men are treated.
Men are treated in those societies. None whatsoever.
But here's the
Mexico. Oh my God! It's medium green. Mexico is medium green, probably because the murder rate of women is higher than it is in the United States and Canada. Well, okay, let's compare it to the fucking murder rate of men.
That's irrelevant. The education of men is irrelevant, except insofar as women achieve as much education as men. If that's the case, or they achieve more than these particular groups, they give them equality in any situation.
One of the fucking things, and I just want to say this, I just want to get this out. One of the fucking things that I thought was absolutely fucking hilarious was you had this UN fucking bullshit, you know, like equality freaking standards, you know, and we're going to rate different countries for their equality, right? Their gender equality. Okay, now, if a country went from having a 7-year gap, right, in favor of women in life expectancy between 2005 and 2010, right? So they went from having a 7-year gap in 2005 favoring women to a 5-year gap in 2010, right? Still favoring women. They scored lower in 2010.
On equality.
Even if both sexes lived longer.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It doesn't, because it has absolutely no relationship to men, except it does keep track of everything where women fall behind, but as soon as women pull ahead of men, that is considered equality. That's it. So this represents all kinds of things where men are actually lagging significant behind women in rights. But that's not the point I wanted to get to, because I want everybody to look at the distribution of the colors. And then I'm going to show you another map, because this is what feminism has created. It has created a moral schema in which we can judge ourselves. And we can judge some cultures and some people and some governments and some groups to be morally inferior. And now I'm going to show you another map. This is the map of skin color across the globe. It almost has a 1-to-1 relationship with the map of superior morality that I just showed you. So, in other words, feminism has created a moral schema in which the whitest, and, oh, incidentally, here's another map, and you'll see that it also has a 1-to-1 correlation. This is the wealth distribution through the world. So this CEDAW map essentially is proof that white, wealthy, Western people are morally superior to everybody, according to CEDAW. And nobody ever calls them out on this shit and says, wait a second.
Yeah.
Wait a second. So you're saying we're the one, you could call us a quasi-empire in history that's got it right when it's decided that we are the most moral compared to everyone. Or maybe something else is happening here. And societies will give women as much freedom and as much resources
as they can afford.
And there is no moral schema here. What we are seeing is that all this is demonstrating, all the CEDAW map is demonstrating, is that some societies are poorer than others. But, you know, we're more moral than them.
Well, of course we are, Alison.
No, we got it right. We got it right this time. We got it right.
Yeah, no, we totally did. We totally got it right this time. You know, I think we totally did it. That's why we're lying down and allowing ourselves to be essentially bred out of existence.
Well, you know, I don't agree. And it seems really suspicious to me that we've managed to create a moral system in which we are on top.
Well, okay, but here's the thing, right? When you are in a position where you are held responsible for everything, you're blamed for everything, okay? You are blamed. You are to blame for all of the ills of history. What does that tell you? What fundamentally does that tell you? You were in charge of history. You are in charge now. You have power now. I mean, if you didn't have power, you couldn't be blamed, right?
Well, essentially what I'm getting at is in every single part of this is a broad, extremely unnuanced hammer. The CEDAW map is basically just a hammer. It doesn't take into account any local stuff. It doesn't take into account economic conditions. It's just basically a hammer, a feminist hammer. That's it. And what I'm trying to get at is if you actually look at it, it's extremely classist and racist.
Well,
and
yeah.
Tone deaf.
No, I mean, like, okay, where's Bangladesh in here? You know, where's Bangladesh in this map? You know, where that 15-year-old boy is going to work in the shipbreaking yard, but his mother and sisters are forced by custom and law to have dinner ready for him. You know, a dinner of chickpeas and rice ready for him when he gets home, right? Because he's head of the household and he gets to make financial decisions for the family because he's the one working in the fucking shipbreaking yard, right? And this is what really fucking pisses me off, right? Is that when Westerners look, right, when we look at our history, right, our own history, and when we look at other countries who are, you know, and it's not about their culture having not evolved. It's not about these cultures being stunted. No, it's about their environment. It's about their economic environment. It's about their political environment. It's about the environmental conditions that they have to live under, right? And so when you literally have that Bangladeshi kid who is essentially forced by law and custom in his country to work in a shipbreaking yard to support his sisters and his mother, right? Because his dad died on the job, right? And they are required by law and by custom, in the same way he is, to work that job. They are required to provide him with a meal and essentially do what he tells them. You know, like, yeah, no, you can't do this, you can do this. This other thing, right? This situation that puts him in the position of being head of household, right? When you only look at how that affects those women, and then you're like, we need to give these women more rights. Well, what is more rights going to do them, right? Okay, they can dream of being president, just like every fucking boy who's destined for the shipbreaking yard and not the fucking presidency of Bangladesh, right? Okay, yeah, great, wonderful, right? That's not solving their immediate problems. They're dealing with the environment that they're living in. They're dealing with the poverty that they're living in, and I'm not even blaming the women, right? I'm not even saying these women are like freaking chicken shit for not taking responsibility. No, who would want that, right? If they could have somebody be responsible for them, right, rather than be responsible for themselves. And I guarantee you, there is no woman in that position in a shanty town in Bangladesh who is going to say, "Oh yeah, no, I would accept this deal. Yeah, no, you're going to offer me a deal that's even sweeter than the deal my brother has. You're gonna say I'm just responsible for myself, not for myself and 3 other people, just for myself." Right? She's not going to take that. Who would? Who fucking would? Okay? I'm not blaming those women, right? But unless you actually look at the fact that women are contributing to this, right? Women are putting men in this position. Women, by their choices to essentially say, yes, I'm going to let my 15-year-old brother be the head of the household and dictate to me what I do and do not do, right? Because he's willing to put a roof over my head and chickpeas in my fucking pot, right? That's what he's willing to do at the unbelievable level of physical cost and risk that he's dealing with on every fucking day, right? After seeing our father die on that job, right? Okay, yeah, no, you need to actually look at the entire fucking thing. Not just, oh, it's so unfair. She's chained to the fucking kitchen stove. Oh, and she has no rights to decide what she wants to do with her life. Well, what good is rights if all it allows you to choose is the fucking ship-breaking yard?
Yeah. In this, when I spoke to Ed about this particular picture, what I wanted to capture was this concept of feminism being very much out of touch with with actual issues women and men face in areas that experience poverty and war. I don't actually think that feminism really is about helping those areas in so much as it is about maintaining this kind of a moral schema, this kind of hierarchy. And again, this has nothing to do with women's rights activists or men's rights activists. This is about an ideology. From what I've been seeing, and I can show you the maps again, a lot of the places where CEDAW is like you can see for the CEDAW map, which I can't show you at the moment because I'm showing you this, but when you look at it and you compare it to income, you see that every place that's poor scores lower on the CEDAW map. And
I wonder why. I fucking wonder why.
Yeah, you wonder why. It's an issue. Many of these cases, many human rights abuses and women's rights abuses, are issues, and men's rights abuses are issues of poverty. And often the poverty can lead to warfare because simply people can't get the resources that they need. And when you look at the legal situation for women and the social restrictions on women, a community and cultures often have to embrace strategies that leave men expendable, either so that they can be turned out or used as soldiers to claim resources. Now, an example of men being turned out was during the Dust Bowl, the Depression in the U.S. If you've ever read any of those pioneer diaries or diaries from families of that era, they would turn out their boys, essentially just force them, or not force them, but just tell them to leave the house, the family house, because they did not have, or they did not want to expend the resources on them, so that these boys and young men would be left to fend for themselves in a economy where they probably couldn't get a job. So essentially, these families would turn them out to die in a ditch somewhere, basically.
Yeah, no, these families couldn't afford their sons.
Yeah,
right?
So
they couldn't afford their sons and their daughters.
So what they do, and in order to sustain that kind of a level of expendability, in order to be able to tell your son, yeah, fuck off, or just just tell your son, now it's time for you to leave. You know, we're just going to forget or just not think about the fact that this is basically a death sentence. But you have to leave. We need to provide for your sister, and we cannot provide for you. So you must leave. Or alternatively, in order to maintain the attitude that men should be conscripted and be soldiers and expend themselves in violence, getting resources for a society, you have to create this hierarchy of agency with men on top. Because otherwise it's just too psychologically painful. And by emphasizing men's agency with these social restrictions on women, or these legal restrictions on women, we reduce our compulsion to actually feel compassion towards men. So, all things considered, a man who is expected to take responsibility for his wife and family and is told in law that he's complete dominion over them, and he has this public perception of his agency, we will care less about that man if he has anything that he needs, or if he's ever in need or vulnerable.
Yeah,
we will feel less of a twinge if we tell you now that since you are the boss of everybody, you got to go out and sacrifice yourself to the wolves.
Yeah.
That's a function. This is how it works. These two things, they fit in together like cogs. Like cogs. Men with a greater perception of social and legal agency and men's expendability. When you want to create expendable men, you give them a so-called higher status. This facilitates not just society caring less about them and being okay with them dying in a ditch. It also facilitates those men caring less about themselves.
Well, it also facilitates this idea that women need to be compensated for their subordination. I mean, like what one of the things that struck me as really, really interesting was that that when I was talking to my two Muslim friends from Lebanon, right, and I was talking about Maria, the bride gift and divorce and all of those things, and one of them, he had just contracted to marry, so he had traveled back to Lebanon to negotiate his contract, and he'd actually gotten laid for the first time, you know, good on him at age 26, and you know, very, very sweet guy. But he told me, you're forgetting one thing about my obligations to my wife, right? Which is that if we have a child and she breastfeeds that child, she has the right under our customs and law to demand a wage from me for breastfeeding my child.
Yeah, and if you look throughout history, one of the ways that, like, if we just dip briefly into slavery, one of the ways that long-term slavery managed to maintain itself is that it would turn the act of having a job into a privilege. And that's what you do. Like, let's use the Roman example. Roman citizens in many cases couldn't have jobs. The only jobs they could be were farmer or soldier. So we had all of the slaves with basically white-collar jobs. But why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you say, hey, you know, that's a privilege you get, because that's what you want out of slaves. You want work. So make them think of work as a privilege, and they'll do it for generations. And yes, there were slave revolts, but that generally those slave revolts came out of the harsher forms of slavery. You know, the quarry slaves, and definitely later on in history, like the slavery in the Caribbean, very harsh, very brutal, and very short. Slavery is maintained more by telling or making slaves believe that their work is a privilege, that working is a privilege, because, you know, the slave masters don't actually have the ability to work. They don't have the right to work. And that's where you see slavery lasting generation after generation after generation after generation. So the other thing that I wanted to capture is that feminist solutions involve empowering women separate from their husbands and families, or in opposition to them. But men are themselves resources. But men are themselves resources that raise families and communities out of poverty. And you see this over and over again. Men are most likely to be able to raise their communities out of poverty and their families out of poverty, and yet feminism sets women in, the euphemistically the third world against men in the third world, even though a man in the third world is more likely to actually get her out of poverty and protect and provide for her. So Western feminists present themselves as saviors and friends to women in the third world, and third world men as those women's oppressors, when those women are far more likely to be protected and provided for by their own men.
Well, it's like bureaugamy. This is the red pill terminology, bureaugamy, which is women's marriage to the government rather than to a monogamous male partner, right? And that I think is a huge part of this, is that when the system can provide you with protection and the provision that you would have otherwise had to trade equitably for, right? You would have had to bargain with somebody, and say, okay, so you're going to support me, you're going to put a roof over my head, you're going to put food on my table, and I'm going to do this. I'm gonna whatever it is. I'm gonna cook for you, I'm going to clean for you, and I'm going to suck your dick twice a week, right? Whatever it is, right? And I'm going to look after, I'm going to take care of your kids, and the kids are going to be ours, and we're going to be like a team, and the whole bit, right? What bureaugamy does is it removes the requirement for women to actually offer men some sort of benefit in return for their investment, right? Bureaugamy essentially takes money at gunpoint from men in the form of child support, alimony, tax burden, right? And then redistributes it to women to be able to look after their children, to be able to take care of themselves and their kids, right? Without the voluntary investment of those men. It's all about the involuntary investment now. It's all about the investment at gunpoint.
And when you look at that situation, women in that situation end up in a level of poverty, and they don't get out of it.
Yeah,
so
they
become state slaves.
Neither do the men. Neither do the men. And this is what's really fucking atrocious, is that everybody gets poorer. Everybody ends up losing out on this. Right?
When they start setting men and women against each other and destroying families. And the other thing is, and this I think is I remember talking to there's a relative in my family whose boyfriend is from Nigeria, and he would just be baffled by what feminists said, because they would assert that women in Nigeria were oppressed or weren't able to work, and he said, no, women in Nigeria, they're always doing something. They're either working with their husbands in their businesses, or they're tending their market gardens or creating like small businesses themselves. And it's like this whole feminist concept is just it's totally tone deaf to the reality.
It's bogus. It's completely
bogus.
It's literally like if they told my mother she was oppressed, right? My mother, who baked bread from scratch, right? She took 17 years off of work to raise us kids. She baked bread from scratch. She stained the siding so that we wouldn't have to pay anybody to do it, right? She cleared sod, spent like an entire summer digging up sod and hauling it to the front walk to be hauled away by my dad when he borrowed a truck from work, come home at 7 o'clock at night and load up the truck and take it to the dump, right? So that they could pour a foundation for the garage that they were planning on building, right? She did all kinds of freaking shit, all kinds of yard work and all kinds of other stuff, right? to enable my dad to work his 60-hour weeks, right, and still be able to, when he was home, right, to not have to actually do stuff, right? Like, or if he was doing stuff, we were all doing stuff as a family. We were spending a day doing yard work. We were spending a day doing whatever together, right? But he was not, like, so she literally did all of the woman things. She planted a garden. She freaking rototilled the soil every fucking spring. She planted it. She freaking harvested it with us kids. She blanched and freaking froze all of the vegetables. She did all of that stuff in order to save enough money to justify her not going out and earning money, right? She fed the neighbor kids lunch. She babysat. She did all kinds of things, right? All of those things made it possible for us to survive. A five-person family, 2 parents, 3 kids, right? On a mechanic's income, right? A mechanic's income, and she, like, literally, my parents retired with about $1 million in assets, right? And after providing me and my sisters with a very, very decent, wonderful, but modest quality of life throughout our entire childhoods, right? So essentially, what you have is this idea that what my mother didn't count for anything, right? Like, what my mother did, and she fucking did so much, right? So much that the amount of work but it didn't come with a tax bill, it didn't come with a pay stub, therefore it just went into the fucking memory hole. It doesn't exist, right? And the fact that my dad was willing to put in 60 to 70-hour weeks, you know, based on the fact that she was able to do this, right, and provide for everybody, be the sole breadwinner for 17 fucking years, right? All of that was just him oppressing her. Yeah, no, it was totally, you know, I wrote a blog post about this. He missed my grade 9 leaving ceremony from junior high because while I was walking across the stage in a dress my mother had sewn for me, because that was one of the things she did to save money, was sewing clothes, right? Okay. While I was doing that, he was lying on his back on the fucking shoulder of a highway underneath a Peterbilt full of toxic waste, trying to figure out, 250 kilometers from where we lived, trying to figure out at 11 o'clock at night what was wrong with it. That was what he was doing. And I can guarantee you he wasn't thinking, oh, I'm so glad I got out of having to attend that boring leaving ceremony of my daughters. No, he was like, this is what I do for my family. I get to risk having my legs run over by cars, right? That's what he was thinking, with a flashlight in his fucking teeth. That's what he did, right?
Yeah.
And what my mother did was what she did. And they were a fucking team. And this is what really fucking pisses me off about the entire feminist narrative, is that they would see my dad as oppressing my mom because out of her own agency, out of her own choices, right, she decided, okay, I'm going to go out of my way to make my husband's life at home as nice as possible. I am going to go out of my way to make every moment that my husband has at home, because those moments are few and far between, okay? I'm going to make them as wonderful as possible. I'm going to make them as trouble-free as possible. I'm going to make them as comfortable as possible. I am going to make them as good for my kids as possible. And we are always going to put out a united front. We are always going to fucking present a unified front to our kids. There will be no playing both ends against the middle. There will be no instance of the kids fucking over one parent by playing the other one against them. There will be none of that. No. My husband and I are a team. And even though my work doesn't come with an official fucking pay stub, an official fucking tax bill, right? It is being paid for by the sweat and the effort of the man who is lying underneath a fucking truck at 11 o'clock at night on a Saturday when he would rather be seeing his daughter walk across the stage, right? That is what this privilege of being able to stay home and do this, right? That is what this costs him. And so, if I have to fucking, plant a garden and harvest vegetables and blanch them and freeze them to make it possible for me to do that, and oh my goodness, I don't get into the fucking census, and oh my goodness, the wage gap. Yeah, no. I'm sorry. That's not my first concern.
I think the Karen's train is flying out of the station. And you're going to have to mute. All right. So what I wanted to conclude with this is, and this is the final point with what I was trying to get with this particular image of Trigglypuff telling all the good boys and girls in the third world to eat votes, is that wealthy Western women appropriate the victimhood credit of women in the third world for themselves. There are two aspects of this. The main one is to generate, one of the main ones is to generate their very useful guilt trip of women's oppressions, which they use to extort reparations from their own governments. So they will go into a third world, promote programs that tear families apart, set third world women against the men in their communities to extract a valuable resource, which is victimhood. And also to push their ideology, which is, men against women, men are responsible for, if people aren't really convinced that you're a victim because you're a wealthy Western woman, just stand by some women in the third world and say, yeah, we're all victims because we're women. I share in their victimhood. And the second one is where I was going with this image. I was thinking about how feminists use victimhood in the third world, the issues that women face in the third world, completely contextless to the issues that men face in the third world. They use those issues in order to silence men's rights activists in the first world, because they'll say, what about the women's in the third world? Not really promoting any kind of intervention in those issues or anything, but just using them in order to silence men's issues in the first world, and to take away focus on them. So the way that I thought about this is, let's imagine there's an English queen trying to, suppress a peasant rebellion. And what she says to all these revolting peasants is, the English aristocracy is oppressed in France, therefore peasants don't need rights. Because this is what first world feminists are saying. Women in the third world are oppressed, therefore men in the first world don't need rights. I don't know how that works, but it does seem to work on people. People seem to shut up after that and not know how to deal with that kind of thing, like that kind of logic. Oh yeah, I guess you're right.
It's not, and what really frustrates me is that this is not a feminist narrative. This is a blanket narrative. Conservatives and feminists both agree on this. I actually hear more often from conservatives, feminists should go and advocate for women's rights in the Middle East or in third world countries. That's where they belong, right? That's where women really need it. It's if anything, I actually see a hands-off approach from feminists because of all of this, a more hands-off approach because of all of this sort of colonialization narrative and all of that, right? So I actually see feminists, at least on the surface, saying, yeah, we're just going to let those cultures be, right? but it's conservatives saying it, to my awareness, it's conservatives saying, go look after women in the third world, because that's where feminism is really needed, right?
Yeah,
And
you haven't met a feminist who does the whole, the women in third world are more oppressed.
Of course I have, and you look at even Anna Kasparian in that video on what's his name, Boyega, Finn the traitor, that I did the video Say My Name over. She's like, well, when it's taken in a global context, maybe not in the first world, but when you take women's rights in a global context, right? Yes, feminists do use that excuse to justify what they're doing here, right? But it seems to be that they use it to justify what they're doing here, right? Whereas conservatives are like, go away from here and go over there. And I am actually in stronger opposition to the conservative aspect of this.
Well, I don't know. Like maybe feminists can go and advocate for lioness rights.
I would just
in the savannah.
Yeah, maybe they could get eaten, and that would be great, right? Triggly.
It wouldn't be great. It would be.
An entire pride of lions could live for a week off of her. That would be great. But I don't think that I literally think that this is a multifaceted. This is not just a problem of feminism. This is literally. This is the same problem that I have with Christina Hoff Sommers, right? And I love her. I think she's wonderful. I think she's a great ally, right? But she has always been of the opinion that feminism was a once noble movement that was corrupted, right? And I disagree. And so if you take first wave feminism and you throw it into India, or you throw it into Iraq, or you throw it into Saudi Arabia, or you throw it into freaking Nigeria, or you throw it into Sierra Leone, right? It's going to follow the same trajectory as Western feminism. It's going to do the exact same fucking things because that's what it is, right? And so essentially, like, the conservative narrative on this, I think, is so naive, right? The feminist narrative is cynical. It's like, I'm going to use these brown people to further my own ends. It's totally cynical. Totally fucking, just absolutely cynical and exploitative, right? You look at the conservatives, they're like well-meaning morons. I'm sorry, they are. They're like well-meaning fucking morons. Oh, let's export this wonderful feminism, the first wave. It was great. We'll export it to all of these unsuspecting, freaking vulnerable countries, right? And then they'll be great. It'll turn out wonderful. No, it won't. Because you haven't ever fucking bothered to look.
Okay. I think the Karen train is finally in the station, Brian.
No, it's not, but I'm willing to just fucking put on the brakes.
All right, cool. Thank you for pulling the emergency lever on that. I just want to give Maria Al-Masani and Habib some last words because I know that Maria has to leave. Maria, want to thank you and Habib for coming on. And I know because like the time, with Habib specifically, the time difference is so great. But Maria, do you want to say any final words before you take off? Maria?
Oh no.
Oh no. Have we? Okay. I'll go to.
Yeah, I'll go.
Oh, there she is. Wait.
Okay. So I think feminists are very cynical. They and yes, exactly. The right are well-meaning morons. That's the best description I've heard of them. So what they do is they divide and conquer. So they basically push the right pushes feminism onto us. We know. We look at Trigglypuff. We're like, we don't want her. Either you keep her or have an island where all the feminists live together and try to survive and eat each other. But just keep them out of the third world. And then conservatives are like, you're ISIS, and then
Maria?
Uh-oh.
They're saying,
Oh,
what, we
there you
have
are.
real problems, and we have the issues, and we need to deal with them. And when it comes to authoritarianism, you know what? Ukraine gave up its nukes for defense for a secular Western Europe that's, really great with human rights. Western Europe, when Russia attacked, defaulted on its responsibility. Saudi, that is authoritarian, when we had the same problem in Yemen and we were invaded and attacked by Iranian Houthi fundamentalists, Saudi came to our rescue, and it helped even women, it helped even socialists, people who didn't even share their beliefs. So, in a way, we're grateful. I think removing authoritarianism, civilization is cyclical. At some point, you have authoritarian barbarians, and you need to be able to fight them. They'll take care of you when you're weak. So it always has to be about balance and harmony in the end. If feminism is pushed onto developing countries, by conservatives, they'll fight conservatives because we understand that. And I think that has to be acknowledged, that it is not productive for the third world. We need to improve the lives of women, improve their rights, improve the rights of men, and find something that has harmony, that helps the community live a better life.
Okay. Thank you, Maria. And well, I want to just thank you. That was really great to share. And we have her contact information in the low bar of the fireside chat that I had with her, which I think you should totally watch. There's more conversation that went on there. So, and Habib, do you have any last words? Any thing that you want to say?
I've been quiet for a while. I don't know. Where do I start? I think the main difference between the Eastern, or let's say the Middle Eastern feminist movement or women's rights advocacy movements and the West is mainly the family, and how in the West I see a lot of movement. A lot of the movement is trying to destroy the family, especially like the nuclear family, father and mother and a couple of kids. No, this just has to go. While, at least with my experience in Saudi Arabia, most of them are trying to keep the family together, because the way the authoritarian Sharia espousing law is being applied is not compatible with modern societies. A household these days, and especially with expensive cities and expensive lifestyles, cannot stand with only one head of the family. It just cannot. It needs contribution from the women as well. Most of the women, when they're trying to get their rights, and most of the men that are trying to advocate for their rights, it's of the need to keep the family together. Because, yes, the obligation just being all put on the shoulders of the man is destroying it.
Habib?
Apart. We're talking a lot about the family, but
well, you dropped for a second, but you seem okay now. No, you blacked out for a second. Sorry, it's these long distance things.
Yeah, you guys talked a lot about the family, but the way I see it, that even the people are fighting for the families and not against them. So maybe in the broader sense of things, we need to just step back sometimes.
Is it really difficult to understand, Habib, for anyone else?
Yeah, he's really robotic right now.
Yeah, this is, sorry, Habib, if you can hear us, we can't, it's almost impossible to make you out.
Yeah, you're dropping in and out, your signal. I'm really sorry, man. I don't know what it is. I mean, it's the internet, obviously, but do
you want to give it a little bit, one more try?
Yeah. Can you are you there? Try unmuting and unmuting, or leaving and coming back in real quick.
Well, let's give I'll give Habib a little bit of extra time by just showing myself.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and as you can see, I'm going to present this again. Now, this again is the CDAW map, Community for Eliminating Discrimination Against Women. And of course, this situation is it definitely puts certain cultures and groups on the top of this moral hierarchy. Now, what would be interesting is if someone compiled a map on men's rights, because I imagine that a lot of these areas would essentially not be, if you actually looked at the world in terms of judging it not just by how it affects men, but also by how it affects, not just by how it affects women, but also by how it affects men, the CDAW map would be very, or I guess it would be a CMA, no, CDOM, DAW, a CDAW map. And it would be interesting, because then you would see a situation where men don't have rights, and I mean, even the thought is sort of baffling. Like, it's like, could you imagine that? Because a lot of these countries where we think are doing so well morally would be entirely flipped on its head. And you would actually see the immorality of these cultures because they just don't care about women. You know, and I just find that interesting because it's not something that we consider, that this moral schema not only puts particular cultures on a hierarchy, but it may not actually be accurate to their morality. Maybe we should judge our morality not just by how society treats that group of people which are generally valued, at least for their ability to reproduce and their wombs, you know, that is a value. But not just on how they treat those groups of people that are usually valued, but by how they treat those groups of people who are usually treated as expendable. Maybe that would actually be a more accurate barometer of human rights. Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
so Habib isn't coming back.
No, he's got his Firefox crashed, and he's like, I'm not gonna be able to get back on without doing a bunch of stuff, and he doesn't want to hold us up, but he does say he appreciates us having him on, and hopefully he can come back and we can continue the conversation, or
yeah, we
talk
don't
about
have
something
anybody
else
to
or whatever.
argue. We don't have anybody to argue that there should be feminism in the Middle East or the in the Third World.
Yeah. Well, the last thing I would say is something that I drove home a couple times while we were talking, that also Maria has said and GOT has said. Feminism and women's rights advocacy are not the same thing. And
Yeah.
one of them may appear to be the short road because, it's probably, and this is why I asked Maria about, like, her opposition was feminists also. One would think that feminism, because it is powerful and has a lot of resources, would be the easier way to get women's rights done. But I don't believe, just based on what we've talked about, that taking the easier road and going with the bigger lobbyists and the more powerful, people with more resources is actually going to be the best move. So it's, even if you are mainly concerned with women's rights advocacy and not straight up like equality across the board, or human rights across the board. So I would ask. I'm going to ask the chat. What do you think? Do you think that going with feminism in the third world is the best move because you might have a better chance of getting the results you want, or is it better to just advocate for human rights, as a WRA or an MRA, or on a case-by-case basis, as the needs come? So, and I'll make it a poll and I'll put it in the show.
I actually don't think that's the only question.
I don't think.
I actually think that one of the questions is that is there a possibility for advocacy for women's rights that does not involve a descent into feminism? And given the history of Western society, I am a little bit leery, a little bit wary of anybody who would suggest that advocacy for women's rights can actually occur without a descent into feminism. So.
Okay. And Maria, you had something you wanted to add, or not?
No, I think
Go
she
ahead.
did. I thought you were going to say something, Maria.
Sorry. None of us want to end up as a single cat lady, age 42, looking like Trigglypuff, being all miserable. I mean, this is what we see as feminism. We see how miserable they are, how unhappy they are. I'm happily married. I have a wonderful husband. I really love him. I have a wonderful community. You know, and all these things that bring joy to my life. And my extended family is wonderful. You know, and I'm happy. I don't see why do I need to bring Trigglypuff into Yemen. This is the thing. It's like we see it as this form of disease. It's this cancer. It's this sectarianism. It's, for example, Iran can give us money and destroy our society. This is why, with the very little things people have,
Oh no. Is she
they're fighting Houthis. Lay down our lives for our. We see feminism as a cancer, a tyranny, sectarianism. It's like you get aid from Iran, your society is wonderful, tomorrow Sunnis and Shia fight each other. You get aid from feminism, it's like this taking aid from the Ayatollahs. There is no difference. This is why many countries say, you know what, we're not taking money from Iran, we take money from Iran, our Sunnis and Shia, Christian, Muslim, everyone fight each other. We're not taking this money. And people prefer to be poor than fight their family members, than brother fight brother. And the same thing, there is no difference between Western feminism and Iranian sectarianism that the Islamic Republic of Iran promotes.
Well, I would agree that it's a good thing that you're looking at it that way, but I also want to suggest to you that when Western culture embraced feminism, when it gave women the vote in 1918, 1919, 1920, that nobody was envisioning Trigglypuff. Nobody was seeing Trigglypuff in their future, not in their immediate future, not in their distant future. They were not seeing the end result of the road. And so, like, essentially, what looks innocuous now may not be innocuous 50, 75, 100 years from now. This is what I want to impress on every single culture that has not been essentially infested by the Trigglypuffs, and that doesn't have trouble with Trigglypuffs. That's a Star Trek reference, by the way. Not Tribbles, but Trigglypuffs.
Trigglypuffs.
Yeah, that essentially we didn't plan for this either. The West did not envision this kind of bizarre, fucked up way of going about things and way of thinking of things when we embarked on this sort of journey, this collective journey towards women's liberation and women's emancipation from, like, quote, patriarchy, end quote. We didn't see any of this coming, and one of the things that a lot of black men who get in contact with me, a lot of the things that they say have to do with them saying, yes, I love it when you speak about what's going on in the black community. I love it when you speak about these issues. We are your canary in the coal mine, and this is absolutely borne out by the evidence. Like, we're lagging about 20 years behind them, but within 20 years we will be right up there with where they are now in the U.S. with out-of-wedlock births and fatherless children and people on welfare and all of those things, right, if the trends continue, right? They email me and tell me we're your canary in the coal mine, and what we in the West are hoping to tell you, what the few people who are aware of what's going on in the West are hoping to tell you, is that we are your canary in the coal mine, right? That we are the ones who are saying, you need to be really, really careful about how you implement change. You need to be really careful about, in order to look at both sides of the coin, look at both sides of each law, look at, don't just look at the rights, the lack of rights of women, look at the lack of responsibilities of women. And if women want the rights, they should get the responsibilities, and try to make change in a sane way, because this is not what the West has done. The West has not made change in a sane, fair, just and equitable way. We have made change in a way that relieves women of burdens, relieves women of restrictions, relieves women of constraints, relieves women of obligations, and maintains all of those things, all of the things, the parallel side of things for men, maintains them all, still enforces them all. 150 years later, we're still putting men in jail. There's a meme going around online showing condos, right? Just like, townhouses, right? That says government subsidized housing for women who can't afford to support their children, and then shows a jail, prison, right? And says government funded housing for men who can't support their children. That's what things are like in the West right now. Is that when a woman can't afford to support her children, she gets subsidized housing in a nice condo. When a man can't afford that, he gets prison, right? This is what we don't want to see. You go down this road, right? And we didn't see it coming either. Right? We really didn't.
In a way, this is why I'm not a big fan of when people say, oh, atheism, remove your religion, and be feminists. Like, conservatives try to push all this track on us. And we're like, no. You know, what we're going to do is look at
We lost her.
Okay.
indigenous keeps the faith on a case basis. Sometimes there are men that are oppressed, sometimes women. Do you know what women's rights activists are doing now in Yemen? Most of them are focusing on helping
Well, I would have loved to have heard the end of that sentence.
men helping themselves, right? So it's right now it's helping the boys at the war front because they're dying in the numbers. Right now our activism is focused on helping those boys, and also a lot of women's activism is about stopping child soldiers because they're sending children because they have too many mouths to feed. They send 10-year-old boys onto the front in the other end of the country and have less kids, use contraception, have only the number of kids you can afford, and that's not 14 kids. So, I mean, this is why for the third world it's like a case-by-case basis. Sometimes we defend the rights of a journalist who's in prison, sometimes it's a woman, so it's a case-by-case basis. I think that's the key. I mean, you look at the society and we always focus, how can something have harmony, bring everything together? I like to work with Carmen. I am not at all brotherhood. I disagree with her politics 100%. What I liked, what she did, she won the Nobel Peace Prize, Yemeni woman, first Arab woman to win a Nobel Peace Prize. She brought secular people, she brought the religious people, she brought everyone together at the same table and tried to create something that was harmonious with the culture, with the tradition, that improved conditions for girls and child marriages. And now, before it was child marriages, now the issue is child soldiers. So again, expend too many mouths to feed, and that results in problems. I think dealing with it in a way that's harmonious, bringing everyone, including the clerics, bringing everyone to the table and figuring out how to, as a society, improve the situation and not point fingers at religion or point fingers at secularism or this or that. It's important not to point fingers and look at organically evolution of harmony. How do you improve harmony? I look at it as empowerment. How do we, as a community, as a group, improve their lives, because there's a delicate ecology, you know, and if you break it, you will have a huge imbalance 150 years later. The problem with the West, I see with feminism, is they wanted to be Superman, to be greater than God, and to create a new man and new woman and change the fabric of the society. And all what happened was there was no new man or new woman except for Trigglypuff, and the society fabric was all ripped. So what we're doing is we're just treading more carefully with the fabric of the society and trying to keep, you know, harmony and the society going on for generations and many years.
All right. I think that's a good place to end, Brian. And I'm going to just do the final shilling.
All right. Thank you again, Maria, for coming and joining us. And thank you, Anna, for sharing your story.
Okay, so what we need to see basically is an intervention that moves past the traditionalist blunt hammer of feminism, judge society by its treatment of women, to real equality or equity that includes responsibilities for women along with citizenship rights. And hopefully we've laid out some of the reefs in the shoals there that you can get wrecked upon. You can get that ship wrecked upon very easily. And tonight on Honey Badger Radio, we've seen a debate between Habib, an Arab man who's an atheist and a women's rights advocate, and Maria, a pious Muslim woman who wants to preserve Islam, or at least not point fingers. And we've also talked to Jyoti, a female men's rights activist in India, and Anna chimed in about her experiences in Moldova. Where else are you going to find these kinds of conversations? These are the discussions that need to happen if we're going to make any progress moving forward, creating intelligent interventions for these issues. You can't change anything by doing the same damn thing over and over and over and over and over and over. And the same damn thing has been endless balkanism between groups. Atheists against the religious, Muslims against Christians, conservatives against liberals, Trump versus Bernie. No one talking, everyone shouting, and all of us shuffling into our ideological safe spaces where we don't have to hear a contrary point of view. So if you want to support real change, which starts with doing things differently, if you want to support our work, getting everyone to the table and talking, then you know where to go. www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. And I got a cute little animation, doopity-doo, that's really adorable, and thanks to one of our animation volunteers, Frost, or Corvus. Here you go. Okay, Brian,